Looking down at the way the jewels were arrayed on the table, Clown spoke in a reserved tone.
The after effects of Ashbourne's boundary are still lingering.
More! This was a magus's workshop, so this kind of thing is to be expected. But that aside, there's one thing left that still troubles me.
And what would that be? May I ask?
Of course, it's the reason why someone went out of their way to announce how they were planning on killing us all.
Hashazar, was it?
Clown murmured the angelic name of the late Hishiria Dashino.
Annoyed. Considering mine is Michael, I suppose that means their target is my right tibia.
Even Luvia was well read enough to know the connection between the 72 angels and the parts of the human body. It was true that she hadn't made the connection between the angelic names and the target of the corpse's mutilation until that man brought it up, but that just served to make her more irritated. Similar to with the Chamon-Ferret, the way that Lord took such an unnecessarily deep interest in the magecraft of others bothered her like a thorn in her side.
Why does he care so much about others? Of course, using other Magi's techniques as points of reference for your own was common. Edofels themselves, after all, rose to prominence through the acquisition of arts and mystic codes developed by other Niges. But that aside, there was no value in taking interest in others beyond using them to hone your own craft. Secret arts, inheritances, in the end such things existed only for the improvement of oneself. The fact that they believed their magecraft connected them to the origin was all that allowed them to continue deluding themselves. The method and the objective are already set from the beginning, so no matter what the differing situations of their birth, yes, even for those filthy spellcasters, the techniques of others were nothing more than opportunities to refine your own craft. Man seemed to have been turned around somewhere. No magus, indeed even no spellcaster, thought like that. Even the faculty of law, which used magecraft as a tool for maintaining order within the clock tower, were different. That was what caused a feeling of unease and impatience to scratch at her chest from the inside.
Could it be a result of some magecraft?
At the voice of her butler, Luvia was able to calm down.
My lady...
My apologies. I was distracted after picturing that corpse again. I've thought of that possibility. Not even just necromancy, for considering lineages that could benefit by taking a part of the body related to a specific sign of the zodiac. The list is plentiful, more than 10 at the very least. But really, what concerns me is that there was no need to announce it so brazenly.
Luvia's eyes took on a harsh coldness, giving the impression of a scientist examining an experiment with the utmost precision. At the very least, I hoped we could learn something of value from the Ashbourne family servants. Of course they had asked the servants for anything they might have known. But, as was to be expected, they knew nothing. While it was possible that they were conspiring together to provide a consistent lie, the fact of the matter was that it was very common for even the household servants of a family of Magi to be completely unaware of the existence of magecraft. Even if this was all some sort of plot of the late Jurian Ashbourne, it was far more normal to think the servants wouldn't have been told anything.
I've got the alibis figured out. At the very least.
Effectively, the alibis looked like this. Heine, X, Rosalind, X, El-Melloi and Grey, of Flew, O, or Locke and his assistant, O, Sagan. Oh, the reason El-Melloi and Grey got a triangle was because the only guarantors they had were themselves. Of course, being Magi, such an alibi didn't really absolve them of suspicion in the murder case. While it was true that, being Geraint Ashbourne's castle, their use of magecraft would be severely limited, it obviously wasn't limited enough to keep Hishiri alive.
Thoughtful. But getting her body up onto that statue's sword must have been quite difficult. Well, there was, of course, the all-too-famous telekinesis that could have got the job done. Such a simple magecraft as lifting and moving physical objects was actually unexpectedly difficult. From the start, Magecraft took a circuitous route to deceive the world into producing the desired result. So if you were aiming for such a straightforward result, it would be faster to just do it with your hands. Even so, if Magecraft was to be used for such an end, then the most plausible method would no doubt be using a familiar, probably one with power similar to the beast that Hang had seen. Angels and beasts. On top of that, this repeating motif.
The most famous cherubs that guarded paradise have the same roots as creatures like the sphinxes or the winged lion Anzu from Mesopotamian mythology. There were many lineages of these winged beasts. For example, the symbol of St. Mark, the patron saint of Venice, was a winged lion as well. For this reason, she decided to halt her train of thought there and return to a more immediate concern.
So, why was it that the Magus from the Faculty of Law was killed?
Maybe they were looking for Ashbourne's inheritance, or barring that, at least a clue towards it.
Though judging from the fact that she had her own angelic name, that's a reasonable thought. The fact that the supervisor would have a lead to the inheritance herself is a very real possibility. But that still doesn't explain why they went through the effort of making a spectacle of it.
Luvia placed a single finger on the ruby sitting on the table in front of her. With a gentleness like it was a much-loved companion, she carefully and thoughtfully watched as the scarlet jewel flickered with light. After thinking deeply for a few moments,
Someone?
Message?
Analytical? Yes, among those who are gathered here, perhaps there is a meaningful message directed towards one of them. From now on, I'm going to start killing people like this, and now they could be waiting for their target's response.
I see.
her servant nodded lightly a few times, as if he was truly in awe of his master's insight. From there, he changed the subject.
Have you taken an interest in that young lord?
At that unexpected question, Luvia momentarily faltered. Recovering quickly, as if nothing had happened, she responded with a question of her own.
And why would you think that?
My lady only takes the care of her stuffed animals into her own hands when she has something on her mind.
He said, glancing over his sunglasses to Luvia's bed. Her stuffed animal, in the form of an anthropomorphized dog, sat right beside her pillow, its fur brushed to perfection.
Quiet, it had just become a little dirty. That's all. That being said, it would be a lie to say I hadn't taken any interest at all.
Luvia's brow bore a harsh expression. Of course, becoming a lord at such an age was beyond exceptional. And while there were astounding exceptions to the rules here and there in the clock tower, there was no doubt he was the youngest lord the clock tower had ever seen. No, the issue wasn't just his personal youth. His family's history was at such a level that no matter who he was, being invited to be a lord was suspicious. She had already had Clown gather as much information as possible about the other guests at the castle. His family had only begun the study of magecraft, a mere 2 generations past. The fact that the Magi, who had spent countless generations researching into their own mysteries, had led a mere 3rd-generation magus into their midst, spoke volumes about his backer. Rhaenys El-Melloi II. While in a way you could just say that the previous Lord El-Melloi's death and following succession had ended in that result, depending on your point of view, one could say that it was her own devilish craftiness that had won them the prize that was the title of Lord.
Thoughtful. Though I really have no idea whether she is really that bad of a person. For now, she was reserving judgment on Lord El-Melloi II. She may have had an opinion of him as a person, but she wouldn't let that get in the way of her professional opinion of him. She did, however, hold a certain conviction. The two of them were definitely incompatible. He was, at his core, twisted in some way.
At that thought, she suddenly raised her head. There was a knock at the door. With just the movement of her eyes, Clown had his orders and sprang into action. Placing himself in the blind spot of the door, he returned the knock with the back of his hand. The door opened, and a carefree silhouette emerged from behind it.
Whoa.
Naturally, on the other side of the door, the visitor found Luvia's servant, fists in a combat-ready stance.
Hey, please. I don't need such a violent reception.
Raising both his hands in the air, the visitor swallowed nervously. The Mohican's stance showed an intent to kill without a hint of hesitation. Being nearly 2 meters tall gave him plenty of pressure, but being in a combat-ready stance made it even fiercer. While it was a mystery whether he was a magus or not, the fact that the ever-proud Edelfelt family felt he alone was sufficient as an escort meant that he was anything but a normal bodyguard.
Flew, the astrologer.
Matching the look she had when gazing at her magic, her eyes showed a sense of exultation and a contradictory coldness.
Threatening? Walking into another's room so nonchalantly meant you were prepared for this sort of welcome. No, I don't particularly mind if Clown gives you a good punch. Besides, I'm in a fairly bad mood right now. Maybe cutting out your heart will little...
As expected of the Edelfelt's princess.
Rubbing his unshaven face, the astrologer laughed happily. Glancing over to the table where Luvia's map was resting, Flu let out a whistle of admiration.
I see you were trying some divination as well, though no matter how good you are, I doubt it went very well.
I wonder...
Please, no need for bluffs. I may look like a mess, but I really am an astrologer. Sure, the Edelfelt's jewel magic is beyond my field of expertise, but if I walk into an astrological ritual halfway, there's no way I wouldn't recognize it. Oh, and don't bother being flustered about it either. This is another Magus's workshop. The land and the air themselves are against us. I guess it figures that Geryon Ashbourne wouldn't set this up so it could all be solved in an instant with fortune-telling. Though I suppose we're still not sure if that killing was brought on by Geryon himself.
With his long speech, it felt like he was clowning around more than Clown himself. Even now Luvia's servant was still on guard. If he made one mistake, those fists would come flying, and even if he somehow managed to dodge those, Luvia's magecraft was scarier in the first place. Even knowing that, Flu kept up his light-hearted chatter. Luvia reached out and touched the gems lying on the table. When it came to jewel magic, the jewels themselves were the source of all their magecraft. So for Luvia, that simple action was similar to toying with a revolver in front of her hostage. Well, considering her abilities as a member of the Edelfelt family, it might be more accurate to describe it as a Gatling gun or a grenade launcher. With a pressure overflowing with elegance, Luvia whispered,
Challenging. And it's any different for you?
I'm an astrologer, you know? It's kind of what I do.
Flu patted a dirty hand over his waist, where his nomad-like clothing concealed his belt of knives. The 12 knives held there, each representing one sign of the zodiac, were the same as the ones he had put on display for everyone at the dinner table the previous day. If Luvia's magic was to manipulate the magic energy stored in jewels, then his was to manipulate these knives patterned after the planets.
I guess I'll get right to the point. I'm not really all that interested in the inheritance or whatever, as long as it turns into money in the end.
Flu's words were the perfect image of a filthy spellcaster. As far as he was concerned, magecraft was probably nothing more than a means to make money. But that kind of thinking was still less repulsive than that of that young lord. She could at least understand this way of thinking.
In contrast, you would be willing to put pretty much any amount of money down if you got the inheritance, am I right?
Are you trying to ask me to hire you?
How observant!
For some strange reason, he was the kind of person that could make that kind of expression without seeming vulgar for it. Maybe simply because of his overwhelming friendliness. Rather than a personal virtue, it just seemed like his nature.
The first person I met here was that Lord El-Melloi II. But he's poor as a beggar, right?
But with that, the atmosphere in the room changed dramatically. Luvia reached out and picked the ruby up off the table. While that was enough to heighten the tension in the room, Flu could tell just as well that the internal combustion engine hidden within her was roaring to life. Feeling all the hairs over his body stand on end, he raised his hands again with an expression like she was messing with him.
Hey, princess.
If I'm going to hire you, then I at the very least need to test your skills. No? So here, at the very least, please survive this. Clown, move.
The bullet Luvia had fired previously at Lord El-Melloi II was nothing more than a threat, a bundle of her built-up irritation. Right now, Luviagalita Edefeld was building up enough energy at the tip of her finger that she could likely obliterate even the likes of lower-ranked phantasmal species. With a gentle sound, the gems lying on the old map floated into the air of their own accord. In response to her magical energy, each of the gems began to give of a brilliant light, and soon began whirling around in a vortex of light.
Behold, the Edelfeld's kaleidoscope.
Was that whispered phrase the name of this spell? Magical energy brilliantly shining in countless colors, like a kaleidoscope. That in itself was the secret art that held up the pride of the Edelfelt family. Chapter 3, Part 3, Dash on the morning of the third day. As if he held some sort of a grudge against it, my master glared at the morning sun that had just begun to rise through the windows of the castle. As he walked through its hallways, I walked a short distance behind him, furtively glancing at the others that were keeping pace with him. Those people were, of course, Orlok and his assistant.
Oh, you plan on inspecting the scene again?
Once he realized the direction my master was walking, Orlok spoke up, and that was, of course, towards the central atrium, dominated by the statue of an angel, where Hishiria Deshina was killed. As they approached the door to the room, we saw a nameplate on the door. We hadn't noticed it before, but it seemed like even this room had a name. Shamal.
Chamalay, not an angel of the Shemam Foray, but still one that is fairly central to the Sephiroth of Kabbalah. In the same way, it's aligned with Scorpio, Mars, and is sometimes even called the guardian angel of Tuesdays.
I wasn't sure if it was because this was something that would just be common knowledge to all Magi, but I found it a little irritating how he just casually threw that kind of information out in the open every time.
He is in charge of the Angels of Destruction and is often said to have a lot of things in common with demons.
As if trying to follow his lead, Orlok added after my master finished speaking. Also, as a quick aside, I never once heard his assistant speak. There is a distinct possibility he is actually a homunculus.
Your footsteps really echo here, don't they?
Orlok mentioned as my master's heels struck the floor. As my master slowly knelt down to the floor, Orlok asked another question.
If you were planning on inspecting the room, wouldn't it have been better to do so immediately after the body was found?
At that time, there was no telling when the situation would devolve into killing. In fact, the person I was most scared of at that point was you.
My.
To an outsider, it may have looked like these two were an old man and his grandson, getting along splendidly, but in reality it wouldn't be strange if at any point a life or death struggle would erupt between the two of them. No, considering the difference in their abilities, it would be nothing but a one-sided massacre. That was the kind of partnership they had. While the body had already been removed by Ashbourne's servants, a few bloodstains still remained scattered across the room. Inspecting each one of them, my master's gaze and fingers systematically appraised them one by one. Every once in a while, my master would take out a vial of some sort of liquid from his jacket. With one drop of that liquid, the color of the bloodstain changed dramatically. Seeing this procedure, Orlok stroked his chin as if absorbed in the process.
I see. Rather than science, it's more like medieval-era alchemy. Or maybe it would be more correct to call it a form of witchcraft?
By analyzing the concentration of magical energy remaining in the bloodstains, we can determine when Miss Adeshino died. There's nothing this could be other than magecraft, right?
Of course. Science and magecraft sleep in the same bed after all. Though, maybe an expression like that is a bit too modern to be accurate. After all, if your methods are too direct, you're getting farther away from the mystery, you know?
Well, I've tried a number of methods, and it just turns out this is the one I'm best at.
My master replied politely, all the while continuing his investigation. After applying a drop of the liquid to the bloodstain, he would watch carefully how its color changed, and then move on to another, writing down notes in a notepad as he went. He would also sometimes take a small vial of another liquid, and use it instead, applying it to a place where he had already applied the previous liquid. This pattern repeated as he carried out his investigation. In all honesty, if it had been in any other situation, it was a plain enough process to be simply boring. Yet even so, Orlok watched with undivided attention, his expression like a child that had found an insect for the first time.
The angelic name I was given was Naniel, ruling over the sign of Aries, representing the fall of pride.
Yes, and if your conjecture is correct, I'll be killed by having my tongue pulled out. That's kind of pleasant, in its own way.
Without saying a word, my master applied another drop of liquid to one of the bloodstains. As the sun continued to steadily climbing to the sky beyond the windows, I began to wonder what had happened with breakfast this morning. I could faintly smell something good earlier, so perhaps it had been prepared in the dining room as it had the day before. It was almost like his Shiria Dashina had never died. Or maybe that an event like that was just nothing out of the ordinary for a magus.
No, it's just too strange.
Suddenly, my master broke the silence, stroking his chin as he spoke.
And what would that be?
What happened to her glasses?
At that somewhat odd question, both Orlok and I frowned.
Oh.
She wasn't wearing her glasses when we found her, right?
Well, naturally, it's pretty difficult to gouge out someone's eyes while they are wearing glasses.
Orlok replied with the seemingly obvious response. Because of how obvious it was something that none of them had even taken note of when they found her before. Rather than her glasses or other accessories, their attention was held strongly by what had happened to her eyes.
Right. But according to this, her time of death would have been...
Before he could say any more,
Oh, so you two are working together now, are you?
Orlok said as he turned to face the door. Standing in the doorway they had entered through earlier, a new pair of figures could be seen. While my master and Orlok were certainly the same, they really looked like an unfitting pair. A girl so beautiful she would be the center of attention at any ball, with the astrologer caked in filth, that looked like he had just been trekking through the desert. Luvia and Flu, Chapter 4. Cast by Artella Studio. Please subscribe to our channel if you enjoy listening. Behind them was Luvia's Mohican servant. Despite being almost 2 meters tall, he blended into the scenery splendidly. Perhaps that was a skill learned as part of his profession as a servant.
Oh, yeah, sorry about that. But I've been supplied. Looks like I'm playing for this team now.
Suit yourself, but if at all possible, please don't bother me. I'm in the middle of an investigation.
And what do you think you'll learn from something like that?
I frowned. Luvia's voice had a sharpness that couldn't quite be masked, as if she was upset at something. Whether they just had bad affinity, or their first meeting had damaged their relationship, there was an obvious danger in the air between them from the start, but this seemed like something more.
Lots.
Lots? What do you think you can learn when you don't even know the scope of your suspect's abilities?
Once again, the girl asked the same question. It was an obvious declaration that she wouldn't take any half-baked answers. In contrast, my master never even lifted his gaze, speaking as he continued to watch the floor.
Well, yes, there's no meaning in that. At least when it comes to the howdunit.
How done it?
Sorry, it's some detective novel jargon. Basically, how did the culprit commit the crime? Similarly, whodunit would refer to who is the culprit. There's no telling what kind of supernatural things Mage are capable of, so without knowing the limits, those are meaningless questions. When it comes to Gorikion's mystery, or even this incident, such straightforward deductive reasoning has no value.
I somewhat understood what my master was saying. Even in my hometown, detective novels were plentiful. The famous detectives in them typically showed off their incredible minds by focusing on these two questions, but if Magi were going to be part of the equation, there was little that such reasoning could offer. When you realized that some Magi could do things like walk through walls or fly through the air, the methods they could use to commit the crime would be next to limitless.
But the whodunit, why they committed the crime in the first place, that remains a possibility, even if their origin is different. A person's elemental affinity will reflect their nature. Magecraft is no different. For Magi, who have been steeped in the story of Magecraft since before they were even born, whether they accept that fate or rebel against it, it will doubtlessly brand them down to their very core. In that way, no one is as incapable of lying as a magus.
Speaking softly, he kept his eyes locked on the floor, sometimes cleaning dust away with a small brush, sometimes inspecting the floor through his magnifying glass. He was still locked in his battle with his mysterious liquid. Maybe as a result of how hard he was focusing, sweat began to bead on his forehead, which he would wipe away with the back of his hand from time to time.
So, I believe, even if I can't solve the mystery, I can still find a way to get closer.
In what way?
It wasn't that she didn't understand what my master was saying, but more like she was pressing him to prove it to her. Receiving her provocation, he finally lifted his eyes.
For example, if it was the Edelfelt jewel magic,
Luvia's expression visibly twitched.
the relationship between magecraft and jewels dates back to Mesopotamia and ancient Egypt. So basically, it's about as old as human history itself, taking root in gemcraft illusions. From the beginning, jewels were the symbol of royalty, and from the perspective of various forms of alchemy, they were used to preserve youth and health. Aristotle's Book of Minerals is an obvious one, but stone also features as one of the 4 fundamental elements and one of the 4 fundamental natures in Hildegard's Physica.
The book mentioned by my master sounded familiar to me. Of course. Aristotle's Book of Elements had a huge significance even historically. It not only acted as a scientific catalogue of 72 minerals and their medicinal uses, but if I remembered correctly, also spoke about the source of power stones. Point 72. Again, I knew that it was a number with significance in magecraft, but with the degree to which it was appearing, it was starting to seem more like it was cursed.
But, if we look at the Gandra you showed me earlier, your magecraft is clearly sourced closer to Northern Europe. That would mean it uses gems as a medium for magecraft, infusing them with magical energy by dyeing them with the user's own blood or other bodily fluids. It's better to look at it like a form of specialized rune magic. While the state of rune magic in general is in decline, the Edelfelts brought jewels into the mix and cut open a new path for themselves. It's probably a similar situation as to why their spells are in English. If we ask what we can learn from that information, we can see that as an Edelfelt, you probably take great pride in the tremendous value of your jewels, very different from some many other nobles or aristocrats.
Shut up! Say any more and there won't even be dust of you to sweep up.
It seemed like her anger up until now had been doubled no. It really was beyond comparison. Her whole body gave off a murderous rage incomparable to anything before. Even I, who wasn't even the target of that anger, unconsciously recoiled from her outburst. In sharp contrast.
Might I be able to ask you not to threaten my good friend like that?
Orlok Tizimund, with a cheerful expression on his lips, spoke up. Of course, there was no way that Luvia had forgotten about Orlok being in the room, but, unable to ignore his words, her brow twitched.
Indeed. He really is an interesting young fellow. It would be quite a waste to have him blown to pieces here. Is there something wrong with that?
Orlok couldn't help but give a dry chuckle as he asked. Compared to when the two had first met in the lobby of the Castle of Separation, it was as if their positions had been completely reversed. While previously it had been Orlok who had had his secret dragged into the open, now it was her turn to have her facade stripped away. Pressed back by that laugh, that hollow, skull-like laugh, the blonde-haired girl could do nothing but return the jewels she had drawn to her pockets. As she did so, she turned back to my master.
Of course. Certainly you do seem to be in love with magecraft. In a way you could even call yourself an investigator of magecraft. But if you really knew magecraft, you would understand that all you are doing is destroying it.
Hearing that, my master adopted a terribly difficult expression. It was a mysterious look, like he had taken a bite of something nostalgically bitter.
My teacher once told me something similar, you know.
You must have had a rather brilliant teacher then.
Of course. There was no one who could compare to him as a magus. He really is the only one suitable for the name El-Melloi. Was the only one suitable.
Seeing my master's wry expression as he spoke, I unconsciously held my breath. Kenneth El-Melloi, Archibald, my master's own master, and maybe a man who my master killed with his own hands. But without pressing for any more, Luvia turned her back on the room.
Good day then. I'll be praying that you find even a fragment of a star while you're crawling around there on the floor like an animal. See you around.
Flu tossed in his own farewell with a wave as he left to chase after the departing blonde. When the two had completely vanished from earshot,
You were provoking her on purpose, weren't you?
I had the sudden inclination to get back at her for our first meeting. Thanks to you, I was able to enjoy myself thoroughly at her expense. Seeing it refreshes me so much, I feel like it added years to my life.
maybe he was just acting childish, but one wrong step would have been an invitation to death. Master. As I called out, my master put a reassuring hand on my hooded head. He didn't so much as look at me, yet his hand patting my head had an unexpected gentleness to it.
Thank you for protecting me. Thanks to you, I was able to learn something.
Oh!
Orlok's eyes narrowed, once again being lost in a sea of wrinkles.
Could I ask you a question, Mr. Kiesermund?
Chapter 4, Part 1. The image itself was a switch. All magi had different methods. Some people had an image of dropping a firing hammer, and others something more like piercing their own heart. An unexpectedly large number of magi relied on sexual excitement, and among them many were forced to rely on drugs. Regardless of the method, these images were switches to turn the nerves inside the magus's body into magic circuits. By activating these magic circuits, the magus connected themselves to the great magic formula that served as a foundation, and turned the magus themselves into a system for realizing mysteries.
For Flu, that switch was thirst. Walking through the desert. A dryness in his throat he was helpless to do anything about. Long ago the sweat had stopped flowing, and even his eyes had withered up. Even if it was for a single drop of water, he would commit any crime - no. That thinking would only lead to death by dehydration. By using a simple pure thirst as his energy, his nerves flipped over. Suddenly, he was beset by the sensation of a lid being blown off.
He turned. Agony became ecstasy. Thirst became pleasure.
Lead me!
Along with those whispered words, the world changed, along with him. Throwing 6 knives into the air, they sank into the stone floor as if it was made of no more than butter, forming a magic circle. But 3 of those that had cut into the stone were still trembling. They were being resisted. When 2 supernatural phenomena came into contact like this, the result was decided entirely by the skill of the individuals involved. That's why, as far as Flu was concerned, backing down was beyond unthinkable. Setting the ode within his body aflame once more, he transformed it into magical energy and slammed it into the knives again. Then, after striking the stone floor,
Lead me now!
in response to Flu's shout and the flood of magical energy, the knives were sent flying. Removing themselves from the floor, they energetically embedded themselves in a nearby wall. Or so it seemed. As the knives stuck into it, however, what was supposed to be a wall started to fade. As the knives slipped out of it and fell to the ground, it disappeared without a trace. In other words, the wall they had perceived there was not real. The rigorously established bounded field had, before the guidance of Flu's astrology, been completely swept away.
Well done!
An elegant voice called out from beside him. Shortly afterwards, a pale hand reached out towards the darkness in front of them.
Awaken! Call!
In Luvia Galita Edelfelt's hand, a purple flame ignited. Though it seemed like it would burn her pale white hand, it seemed it held no heat as it colored her skin and flooded the darkness with light. Flu dropped to the floor and sat down with a tired sigh.
That was exhausting.
As he spoke, he wiped the sweat from his forehead with the back of his hand. In reality, what he had done had taken the utmost concentration, which was reflected in Flu's complexion looking like he had just aged 10 years. Naturally, this didn't happen every time he used magecraft. It was just that the barrier in the Castle of Separation was that powerful. After leaving the company of Lord El-Melloi II and his friends, the 2 of them began searching every corner of the castle. Dragging him along in her rage, Luvia's pace was such that they didn't miss even the smallest amount of dust in their inspection. Their inspection was honestly so thorough that Flu felt like what they were doing wasn't all that different from Lord El-Melloi II's own inspection. Flu began to massage the area around his throat. It must have been a reaction to his use of magecraft. On top of the fact that using magecraft at all in the castle was incredibly difficult, the excessive use of it was causing him pain not from his body, but from his magic circuits directly. The agonizing sensation of bone scraping against bone was all the harder to bear knowing the pain itself wasn't real, but just an illusion created by his magic circuits.
If you're a magus, that pain should be pleasure itself.
Luvia spoke as if it went without saying. Then, she giving a small nod.
Indeed. For one who has the qualifications, the door will be opened. Obviously the case for a magus.
She spoke as if trying to insinuate something.
Well, I guess she's not wrong. As far as magecraft was concerned, secrets themselves were life. Just as mysteries had meaning because they were mysteries. If they were understood, they lost that force. Of course, simply showing one's magecraft to another magus a single time wasn't enough to have an impact on it, but Lord El-Melloi II's discerning eye brought him frighteningly close. If he was just interested in the history or origin of magecraft, that would be fine. But if he also delved into the thoughts and theories of those magi who regulated that magecraft, Flu felt a shiver run up his spine. Flu felt a shiver run up his spine.
But if you really knew magecraft, you would understand that all you were doing is destroying it. Lord El-Melloi II had clearly understood the meaning behind Luvia's words. Whether it was consciously or not, the fact that he understood that made Luvia that much angrier. Compared to the Edelfelts, called the world's most elegant hyenas, Lord El-Melloi II was even more of a thief. If he could see through to the nature of future magi just by looking at the properties of their magecraft, in a way, it was like he was stealing the mysteries from their future.
Kanta, and he's a lord, huh? The highest position in the clock tower, held by only 12 individuals. Or maybe they were those heretics that refused to stay within the frame of the Association destroyers.
With the violet flame in her hand lighting the way, Luvia carefully descended the steps that had been revealed in the darkness. Even this simple act was carried out with the elegance of a dance. In short order, they came up to a wooden door, and without hesitation, she opened it.
The hell?
Flu hurriedly covered his mouth and nose. Built up within the room was a horrid stench. If he had to put words to it, he would say it smelled like someone had torn the guts out of some livestock, mashed the mess of organs and parts all together, and left it to rot for a few years. Even with his nose covered, it seeped into his throat and lungs, and Flu had to desperately resist the urge to vomit.
Well, it certainly seems like we found what we were looking for.
Luvia, also with a hand in front of her nose, spoke with a frown. Compared to the other rooms in the castle, this one was much more cramped. The windowless room contained a bed, a desk, a silver pentagram and copper goblet. A variety of other small tools no doubt intended for use with magecraft lined the shelves. Aside from that, there were a number of bladed and spiked tools lying around the room that were covered in dark stains and rust.
Torture devices. Flu was reminded of the various implements of torture he had seen in the past, like the Iron Maiden and the Brazen Bull. The most disturbing thing was that even the torture devices were engraved with and modeled after angels. The visage of the normally lovable Cupid, stained dark with dried blood, was unexpectedly repulsive.
It seemed this was Jeriwan Ashbourne's private room. Whether it was the furniture or the tools or the torture devices, everything was awash in images of angels. Thanks to the small size of the room, it gave off the impression of being trapped at the bottom of a deep bog.
Is this where, Geryon Ashbourne restored the magic crusts? Or maybe it's where he tore them from their hosts.
Suddenly the image of torture devices being used to tear the skin off of victims of the witch hunts forced its way into Flu's mind. Even the seasoned mercenary felt a chill from those words.
A picture?
Flu's eyes stopped over the out-of-place-looking picture sitting on one of the shelves. It was a small painting, done in such fine detail that he had initially mistaken it for a photograph. However, paying no mind to Flu, Luvia made her way straight to the desk placed in the room. On the dust-covered desk, numerous magic circles were drawn.
So, this is Ashbourne's foundational formula, is it? Wait a second.
Even ignoring the location itself, The chance that these magic circles were dangerous was high. However, seemingly without a care in the world, Luvia slid a finger across one of the circles. With a snap, the circle reacted with a bolt of lightning. As if being drawn in, the lightning arced upwards and struck a ring on Luvia's finger before being swallowed by the jewel set there. As if nothing had happened at all, Luvia continued her inspection of the magic circles. Seeing words written around them, Luvia read them aloud.
Asmodeus, Belphegor, Baal, Adramelech, Lilith.
Upon hearing the ominous names she read, Flu raised an eyebrow.
Demons? Or rather, fallen angels? Or maybe members of the Qliphoth? You catch on quick, don't you? The dark side of the Sephiroth that symbolized Kabbalah instead of describing the virtues and angels sought after by people who desired heaven, it's an arrangement of the vices and fallen angels that descended into hell. It seems like this is the true nature of the foundation underlying the Castle of Separation.
After a short pause, Luvia smiled like she had come across a beautiful flower.
Yes, with this, we have all the information we need. Shall we show them the way the Edelfelts do things?
Rosalind Istari had stayed in her room the entire time. As her brother had instructed, she ate breakfast and lunch in their room and hadn't so much as stepped beyond the door. Normally, her young heart would be restless from being trapped in a single room for so long, but after the case with Hishiria Dashino, she was more than content where she was. Thanks to her brother's intervention, Rosalind had been spared having to see the scene itself, but the loss of the beautiful woman who had inspired admiration in her weighed heavily in Rosalind's chest.
Cool. A question of who would do such a thing circled endlessly inside her head.
She didn't have to even think to realize that for Magi, anyone could realistically be the culprit. Having grown up in a place where magecraft was weighted more heavily than human life, it wasn't even a question. On top of that, she couldn't even put her own brother outside the list of suspects. She knew full well that he would become any kind of monster or demon if it was for the sake of protecting her, a fact she admitted rather sorrowfully.
Even so, she did nothing other than wait quietly in her room. She did nothing other than sit, eyes downcast at the frustration of how powerless she was.
Something wrong? If you aren't feeling good, I can grab you some tea. Though the stuff I brought is all green tea.
I'm sorry, Mr. Sagan.
Haha, don't mention it. Getting to spend time with a lovely lady such as yourself is about as happy as it gets.
Lightly striking his own chest, Sagan closed his eye. As far as winks went, she couldn't really call it that. Skillful. It was no wonder he added the gesture of beating his chest, though it was the first time she had spent this much time in a room with a member of the opposite sex that wasn't related to her. For some reason, the Yamabushi's presence put her at ease.
Did your brother say something to you?
No, just that I'd be safe as long as I was with you.
Safe with me?
Sagan's mouth twisted into a somewhat ironic smile. Rosalind trusted her brother's words with a simple-minded innocence. After discovering the murder of Hishiria Dashino, the first one Heine had contacted had been Sagan. Even though Heine was out investigating the incident further, as long as this funny Yamabushi was with her, the world seemed a little bit softer to Rosalind.
Did something happen between you two?
Nope. Nothing. Not a thing. Well, I guess being seen through by someone like Hein is fine.
Shrugging, Sagan confessed.
A while ago, I had given up on being a magus.
You, gave up?
Yep, magecraft is normally only taught to a single child in the family, right? Well, it turns out my father was pretty successful when it came to the art of love.
Sagan spoke with a frivolous laugh. While it was pretty uncommon in the Common Era, if you look back far enough there are plenty of examples of kings or other powerful families to have children numbering in the hundreds.
So he thought, why not have them compete with each other?
Compete?
Rosalind's expression moved.
Right. Of course he was a Yamabushi, so it's not like there was a shortage of places to put us while we trained to be ascetics. Though magecraft in general gets weaker as it's spread between more people, Shujindu is a bit different. Since half of it is religion in the first place, having a lot of people learn the basics won't really make all that much of a difference.
Though he had many disciples, the real secret arts that made of his magecraft were taught only to a tiny portion of them. Of course, that was the correct procedure, as far as magi were concerned. The most common pattern was families selecting one child, and then not teaching the other children even about the existence of magecraft. That being said, different regions and styles of magecraft had given birth to a variety of deviations from that pattern. It seems Saigon's family was one of those deviations.
Well, from the start, the systems of magecraft in the East are pretty different from those in the West. Our sect had taken to adopting more Western patterns in its practices, so there were even things like magic crests to pass down. And guess who that magic crest was passed on to? I failed early, so I didn't care either way. While I liked magecraft in general, I wasn't a big fan of the wide-eyed obsession everyone had over the origin, though I suppose more importantly than not having the interest, I didn't have the talent for it. Of course my teacher, or father I guess, was heartbroken, but he understood the situation and knew he could do nothing about it. And that's precisely why I had a brother.
You have a brother?
No wonder, since the situation Saigon was describing was starting to sound like her own.
Yep. Couldn't tell you whether he was on the same level as Heine. Those are awfully big shoes to fill, you know? At the very least, there was no question he was the most skilled out of all of my siblings. As frustrating as it was for some of them, it was a lot better than the alternative of a magus poisoning.
Poisoning? In this case, it was a technical term related to magecraft. A magus would gather a number of creatures, typically poisonous snakes and spiders, and sometimes even things like giant centipedes and scorpions. They would put them all in a small pot and force them to kill and cannibalize each other. Whichever particular one managed to survive until the end would be used as a catalyst for curse magecraft. It was a pretty widespread practice in continental Asia, and it wasn't limited to poisonous or venomous creatures either. There were even examples of people doing the same with cats, dogs, and even wolves. In this case, Saigon was referring to having all of the students of a particular teacher fight each other to the death, and then having the survivor become the successor. Among families that taught magecraft to more than one of their children, it was a relatively common practice. One could say that the fact their father hadn't chosen to pursue that method was the one stroke of good luck Saigon and his siblings had had.
But in this case, that ended up being a disaster, 'cause he left the useless ones like me alive. Among those who were rejected, a number of my siblings held a grudge. While none of them could measure up to my brother alone, when they worked together, stupid, isn't it? If they were planning on working together, they already had lost the requirements to be the successor in the first place anyways. After the ritual for transferring the magic crest to my brother was complete, they launched a surprise attack.
Rosalind held her breath.
The result was as tragic as you would expect. My brother was tenacious enough on his own, but when my master also got involved, the attackers were slaughtered to the man. Idiots. The only one who made it out alive was me, since I hadn't cared enough about the ceremony to go and had been playing hooky in town. In the end, the main temple went up in flames, and my brother and master were both burnt to a crisp along with it.
Oh.
Even through all that, though, my brother managed to survive thanks to the magic crest he had received. Do you get it? It was fire made from shugendu. It was normal for monks to perform various acts like firewalking, so we have a natural resistance to fire. But this was tendu fire. He was honestly charred down to the bone. The crest, though, it kept him alive. He was still moving when I found him. After hearing that much, you can probably guess what he asked me to do.
Sagan's voice had an uncharacteristic heat to it. It was as if he didn't want to talk about any of this at all, yet he couldn't stop himself from talking either.
He asked me to take the magic crest from him. Of course, my brother was virtually dead already, so you can probably guess what kind of condition the crest was in. It's not like we were that much of a magus lineage anyways. Sure, we were more than 10 generations old, but we were a branch family to begin with. So why not just leave everything to the head family and make our own lives? Apparently no one ever considered that. Preserve the magecraft, preserve the mystery, preserve the crest. Our goal is the origin. Like seriously, who cares?
Sagan spoke as if spitting out his words.
Bunch of morons. Every single one of them.
Once again massaging his sleeve, his face contorted. However, that twisted expression soon vanished, melting away into a gentle sigh.
But even so, it was my brother who asked, so I couldn't just ignore it, right? I thought maybe there was something here that could help.
You wanted to do something?
Not really. But there was no other choice. Even after I denied it so much, there was nothing else left for me. Even though I had given up, I had no talent, and I had no guts to continue with my brother and my father dead. There was nothing I could do except continue what they started. Funny.
Saigon's face turned to a grimace. Even if he hadn't come to like the path of magecraft, the ascetic life wasn't exactly hard on him. No matter how difficult life got, living in nature with the beasts of the wild, it filled his heart with a sense of fullness, a sense of enrichment. Originally, Shugendu was a practice that was born from the merging of a peculiar religion and a bizarre magecraft, so it made sense that its practitioners wouldn't be as obsessed with mystery as the Magi of the West. Deep in the forest, the smell of earth, or watching the snow pile up while huddling with the wild animals for warmth. The sky was always broad and open, and the stars were always shining. Even on the night where sickness took him to the brink of death, costing him one of his eyes, he had the natural medicine given to him by his brother. It was bitter enough to make his tongue go numb, but to Saigon it was the most delicious thing he had ever tasted.
My brother really did like magecraft. It's fun to feel your awareness expand, or I feel like I could even grab those clouds. Those were the kinds of things he was always saying. I didn't really get it, but I figured if I took the magic crest, maybe someday my kids would feel the same way. And I thought, maybe if that happens, then maybe my brother's death wouldn't go to waste.
Saigon's actions all stemmed from that one motivation. Knowing he himself wasn't suitable, he was just wishing for a true successor for the crest. Compared to Heine, who had once rejected the crest, and then been forced to give up everything, and take it thanks to Rosalind's condition, the situation seemed very similar. At its core, however, they were more like polar opposites. Maybe that was why he had been able to connect so deeply with Heine. He was filling the gap in his heart from what he had lost long ago.
So, it was something like that.
Rosalind dropped her gaze as she spoke.
Heine really saw right through me there. He was pretty convincing after that.
He said, scratching his nose. Dash, I know who you really are. Heine suddenly had approached Saigon after the incident with Hishiri Edesino. To the Yamabushi who had stood petrified, he continued. Dash, you really do hate that magic crest, don't you? Dash, then. It looks like we're the same. Those words had cut straight through to his heart. To Saigon, whose heart had always felt empty and wounded, those words certainly awoke a dull ache in him. But in return, they also healed something much more painful. For that reason alone, for Tokitu Jirobu Saigon, he felt there was meaning enough in him coming to this castle.
I'm sorry for asking about something so unpleasant.
Nah, not at all.
After scrunching his face in a way that made Rosalind think of some kind of small animal, Saigon rubbed his palm on his robes before lightly bopping her on the head.
Don't worry about it. It's all old news anyways. It's just a convenient dream for me now.
A dream, because he decided entirely by himself to rely on others. For Saigon, the most selfish thing he could do was to pretend like he was a magus just like all the others. That's why it was just a convenient dream for him.
Anyways, all we can do now is wait for Heine to come back, right?
Okay.
As if she was embarrassed, she immediately brought her hands up to her mouth.
Saigon, who do you think killed Hishiri? Do you think it was Ashbourne's curse after all?
I wonder. A magus leaving a curse like that behind is pretty normal after all. But if it's just something like that, there's no way Heine will lose, right?
Yes, because Heine is my...
At that, her words stopped. Leaning sideways on the couch, her breathing settled into the steady pattern of sleep. After putting a blanket over her, Saigon softly stroked the sleeping girl's head. Heine Istari was once again wandering the front gardens of the Castle of Separation. It was a forest. The sound of the leaves rustling overhead gave the impression of a witch's laugh.
It seems I'm going the right way.
He muttered, continuing through the path of fallen leaves. Luvia had joined forces with the astrologer Flu and was looking for clues within the castle itself. Heine had decided on a different approach. Mysterious, an angel becomes a beast. Gazing at the western sky, it swallows the sun. Heine was in a very different place than the one he had reached the night before, where this message had appeared on his invitation. It seemed that Hishiri Adashino's angelic name pointed to a different place than the others. Heine Lord El-Melloi II and Luvia's angelic names had all indicated zodiac signs from Aquarius to Pisces. From a simple astrological perspective, that indicated a position of 300 to 360 degrees. In short, if one were to divide the sky into the 4 seasons, they would point towards the end of winter. Knowing this, Heine was able to calculate a position based on drawing a line from each of their own rooms. However, Hishiri's Hatasaya and Orlok's Nanail, which Heine had secretly investigated earlier, were attributed to the sign of Aries. That pointed them in the direction of 0 to 30 degrees, leading to a very different location. After investigating where that direction led, Heine found the same pedestals he had seen at the other location. As expected, the statues of angels that belonged there were nowhere to be found, but the same message appeared on his invitation. It's really an angel becomes a beast. Gazing at the western sky, it swallows the sun. The message was exactly the same. However, investigating the surroundings, there were traces on the ground as if something had been dragged across it. After thinking for a while, Heine placed his hands on one of the nearby stone monuments and pushed with all his might. After a long effort, the pedestal finally moved, revealing a gap in the earth. From that gap blew a soft wind, traveling up a staircase that disappeared into the darkness below. It wasn't all that unusual for old castles in Europe to have secret underground passages, but what set this one apart was the extreme depth.
Is this where that beast is hiding itself?
After considering his options for a few seconds, Heine steeled himself. If it learned that its hiding place had been discovered, it might move somewhere else. It was now or never. Slowly, Heine descended down the staircase.
Had Hishiri discovered this place as well? That possibility was highly likely. That would mean she had gotten much closer to figuring out the secret of the Castle of Separation. As a result, or maybe as punishment for that, had she been made an example of like that? Also, had Ashbourne intentionally given Mr. Orlok and Miss Hishiri different information? If that was the case, what meaning was there in that? Was she killed somewhere else and then skewered on the sword afterwards? Had she really been brought down by some sort of curse?
At long last, as he continued down the underground passageway, Heine felt a magical energy that was not his own.
It seems this is the heart of his workshop. He didn't exactly doubt that the entire castle was an enormous workshop set up by the Magus, but the idea that it was the place where he created new magecraft was impossible. No, that place must have been hidden carefully away, and still working away even with its master's death. Or maybe it was part of the secret he left in his will.
Heine whispered, and the living stone hidden throughout his body responded. In an instant, his body was encased in a knight's armor, and a spear was in his hands. Despite how anachronistic the armor was, no other look suited him better. Heine thought that it was probably because he was the product of family trapped in the past. Magi were, more than anyone, a group that buried themselves in the darkness of history.
In that way, Saigon was much stronger than he was. Not in his magecraft, but the opposite. Because magecraft was, in its essence, pleasure. The euphoria of wielding a power that transcended the common world. Even if it was a discipline trapped in the past, giving up that joy that was greater than anything else life had to offer was difficult. Before the pleasure magecraft brought, even the pain and suffering brought on by the learning process was as nothing. Sagan, who had thrown that all away by his own volition, was strong. Or maybe it was better to say he had a purity that was normally only found in animals. Even Lord El-Melloi II couldn't escape his thirst for knowledge. In a way, that was a strength Heine himself had never managed to obtain.
Footsteps echoed. The steady echo was so much that it made him somewhat doubt whether the footsteps were his own. Crossed fates, inverted phenomena, reality deceived by magecraft. As magi, they were born from the shadows. In that case, it was inevitable that they would return to them. After all, the desire of Magi to reach the root seemed to have stemmed from a similar thought, didn't it? At last, his footsteps came to a stop. To Heine's eyes, strengthened by magical energy, an even deeper shadow lurking within the darkness of the passage became visible. That beast made of shadows, lurking almost invisibly in the passageway, gave no hints about its true form. As Heine recognized it, he gave a faint smile.
We meet again.
Dropping his hips, Heine lowered his spear at the beast. Even if it was a beast, Heine had no idea what level of intelligence it possessed. It might have been no smarter than a wild animal, but if it was being controlled by a magus, the possibility they had taken precautions for fighting against Heine himself was real, so Heine couldn't let down his guard for a moment. Without putting any confidence in the strength of his armor, he carefully held his spear to create a wide gap between them. If the beast was faster than it had been before, as long as their weapons were only that spear and those claws, Heine could leverage his superior reach and win. If the beast had another trick up its sleeve, well, he could deal with that when it happened. The darkness ran. As Heine struck with his spear, a sharp noise resounded. There was no blood, nor was there even so much as a scratch on Heine's armor. He had certainly felt his spear strike something solid, but...
Looks like you got me.
Heine clicked his tongue as he inspected the end of his spear. It was gone. The beast's claws hadn't been aiming for Heine. They had struck out against the spear. The hardness of the spear was far beyond that of his armor. There was no doubt that the abilities of the beast were far above what they were at their last meeting. The shadow backed away, as if laughing. "How's that? That's how easily I can tear apart your armor." Without a word, Heine waved his spear. The pure metal shaft became slightly shorter as a blade reformed on the tip. But what was the point in doing that? The spear made by your alchemy already lost to my claws. Do you think it will end differently if you try again? The beast seemed to be positively trembling with excitement. It jumped, zigzagging across the narrow corridor. It seemed like a human-sized billiard ball. It jumped 5 times, 8 times, far beyond 20 times. No matter how much Heine had strengthened his eyes, there was no way a human could physically keep up with that kind of movement. The movements at more than 300 kilometers per hour were far beyond the physical limits of the human eye.
Lunging at Heine from his blind spot, the beast's claws shredded through Heine's armor as if it was nothing. Really, like it was nothing in the middle of its attack, the armor had suddenly reached out and grabbed the beast.
I thought of that, too.
His armor could do a lot more than just be hard. In this case, he had done just the opposite, softening it so that it could ensnare his opponent. When the beast had sliced through the spear, Heine changed the quality of his armor. As wary as ever, he reshaped it into chains and used them to further bind the beast.
Now, shall we take a look at what you really are?
Turning around slowly, Heine raised his spear once more. Though there was no sound, the beast still howled. Chapter 4, Part 2. It was the dawn of the 4th day. We were just in the middle of our morning preparations. We had spent a great deal of time speaking with Orlok the night before, so as usual my master was somewhat half asleep as I helped him get dressed properly. Just as we made to leave the room and go get some breakfast, one of Ashbourne's servants came to our room. Once again, they brought news of tragedy. It was that room again. The sunlight streaming down through the skylight above seemed almost like a stairway for angels, an irony we didn't miss. In that same place where we found Hishiri skewered on an angel's sword, at that same angel's feet, there was someone else. It was a scene that really made one think of those old stories of knights from the Middle Ages. Lying at the angel's feet, clad in full armor, was Heine. His arms hung loosely, and his eyes were closed. Even in death, his face looked exactly like one would expect from the tale of a knight. Maybe we should have been thankful, because unlike with Hishiri, his face hadn't been mutilated. Thankful? To who? With a click of his tongue, just by looking at the body, my master made his confirmation.
So Heine was Ariel.
He said under his breath, looking at the body's missing left foot. There was no need for anyone here to specify that the left foot corresponded to the angelic name Ariel. even though my master had been the one to mention that the angelic names were a method of predicting our deaths. Seeing it come true in front of him felt like swallowing a stone. It was a helpless, hollow feeling. On Heine's chest was a bloodstain of considerable size. With that much blood, it was more than likely that that wound was the cause of death. In contrast, even his missing left foot didn't show much signs of bleeding, meaning it had probably been removed after his death. With my emotions paralyzed by the scene before me, I could only coldly list these kinds of facts one after another. But
Why? Why? Him!
a scream laden with misery filled the room. I couldn't do anything but watch as the small girl broke down crying. Standing beside her, Saigen stood with a downcast gaze, grinding his teeth.
Heine!
Both of them looked as if someone had stolen a piece of their hearts. No, it wasn't just them. Even my master looked on the scene with a hardened expression. As one might expect, the scene didn't seem to be as much of a shock as discovering Hishiri's body had been. But even so, his pale expression gave the impression that he just wanted to hurry up and get his own death over with. From behind us, a voice called out.
If Hishiri Adeshino had represented the safety valve of authority, then Heine Istari would represent the safety valve of emotions, no? Ah ha ha ha! It almost seems like a game of Jenga, the pieces being pulled out one at a time.
Orlok.
Turning around, my master spoke the name of the new arrival.
But I already agreed to work together with you, no? In that respect, you're even safer now than before, aren't you?
The old man smiled dangerously, showing briefly the demon that lurked underneath. My master made no response. Instead, with a word of apology, he turned and made his way to the center of the room. Standing before the huddled Rosalind, his face had a bitter twist to it. His expression held a pain that was greater than any I had ever seen in him, no matter what terrible magi he had faced down before. But even so, will unwavering, he spoke.
Miss Rosalind, may I take a look at your brother?
You! Are you the one who killed him? Or you just happy that another rival is dead? Are you just gonna keep killing people until you're the only one left?
Rosalind's accusation hung in the air between them. The same resolve that pushed my master to approach her in the first place was echoed in her eyes and voice. Her expression said clearly that if anyone laid a finger on her brother, she would tear that finger right off. Before her fierce defiance, it seemed even the angels that filled the castle were hesitating to approach.
No, that's not.
My master hesitated, clenching his fists at his side. No matter what words they spun for her, to Rosalind they would surely be meaningless. Her truth had been stolen from her. The joints that kept her world together had been torn apart. The happiness that she deserved was gone, and in its place was a tragedy.
It looks like he died some time after midnight. Shall we take another stab at gathering alibis? No, thank you. I more or less have a handle on what is going on in this farce. I've got my own preparations to make.
With a small curtsy out of formality, she left the room. Without sparing Luvia so much as a look, my master once again gathered his resolve and spoke to Rosalind.
Miss Rosalind?
No one can touch him.
The 8-year-old girl declared defiantly. Not even an army of 10,000 men could overcome this one small girl's feelings. That was the kind of impression she gave. Seeing her resolute face, I stepped forward in the silence that followed her declaration. Rosalind, Saigen, would you let me hold a small memorial service for Heine?
A memorial?
Rosalind's eyes wavered, for the first time showing something other than hostility. That wavering showed me that, even if it was as fragile as glass, that armor she had wrapped herself in was the last thing protecting the small girl's heart. I hadn't planned on doing so. So why did I end up saying that to her? I have a prayer I'd like to say for him. There were only 3 attendees. Leaving me aside, Rosalind, Saigen, and my master were the only ones who came. In a clearing in the forest, far away from the gardens of the castle, we buried the 2 of them. Without the slightest sense of unease, the Ashbourne family servants created the graves for them and placed them inside, as if they were handling no more than pieces of broken furniture.
We really should have done something like this for Miss Adashino earlier, shouldn't we?
My master said, eyeing the mound of earth before him. For now, Heine was buried immediately beside Hishiri. Considering the compatibility of the two, it wouldn't be strange if either of them complained at the way things turned out, but in this case we didn't really have the luxury of another choice. By the time the preparations were complete, it was already early afternoon. The autumn sun seemed to shine down on us with a sense of loneliness. Had it not been for the castle of separation being so close by, the dry scent of earth and fallen leaves would have created an almost poetic atmosphere.
Gray!
Okay. In response to my master's voice, I nodded slightly. First, I took a small censer and placed it forward, setting some incense burning. Luckily, the castle was not lacking when it came to incense. In truth, I was also supposed to sprinkle some holy water as well, but on top of the fact we didn't really have any, it didn't seem appropriate for a magus regardless of if he had once been aligned with the church. For that reason, we didn't bother with the fancy intermonant, or with the supplications of those left behind, so the only thing left was to offer a blessing for the departed. I took a deep breath. Lord God, in whom all find refuge. The words came out smoothly. I thought idly as I spoke that this must be what it's like for your body to remember something. No matter how I thought, I couldn't remember the words properly myself, but when I opened my mouth to speak, they glided out as if it was nothing. We appeal to your boundless mercy. Grant to the soul of your servant, Heine Istari, a kindly welcome. Words I have forgotten long ago poured out, ceasing. But it really felt like a lie. I wasn't a priest, nor did I believe in God or in religion. Among all of us, the one who believed in God the most must have been Heine himself, and he had turned his back on the church. He may have even objected to a prayer like this, but who was it that said prayers for the deceased are for the sake of the living? Who was it that said if you can provide even a small consolation to a person driven mad by loss, then you can wait to question their faith until later? Cleansing of sin. Release from the chains of death. Suddenly, my words stopped. As my body stiffened, I turned to face the three attendees behind me.
Great!
But I couldn't continue. What came next? The first part had come so smoothly, so naturally, but now it was like it had disappeared completely from within me. As if it was no more than an illusion to start with. No matter how hard I tried to remember, not a single word came to me. I had heard the prayer countless times when I was younger, but it seemed like someone like me who didn't believe in God couldn't truly know it.
Is everything okay?
I'm sorry. I needed to apologize. I had disgraced her beloved brother's final moments. I knew it was something that couldn't be forgiven, but what could I do to even begin to apologize? What could I offer her that wouldn't just further disgrace him? I felt a hand land on my shoulder. Turning around, a low voice, carried on breath smelling like cigars, reached my ears.
And entry into everlasting life.
Hearing the next words of the prayer, I gulped. After a short delay, I continued, speaking after my master. An entry into everlasting life. We ask this through our Lord. Finishing the prayer, I made the symbol of the cross. Amen. Let it be so. Blessings for the departed. Even if we don't believe in eternal life after death, please be with us and our perishable souls. For a while, no one said anything, and a quiet stillness settled over the area. In that silence, I replaced the lid on the censer and fought the urge to sit down from the onset of fatigue, just as I made to once again put the lid on my feelings as well.
Thank you.
Rosalind bowed her head towards me. It was as if she had been released from an evil spirit possessing her. She still looked as if she had lost a part of herself, but her heart no longer seemed chained to that loss.
I'm sorry. I said some awful things earlier.
That's... As I struggled to come up with something to say, I found myself speechless. Luckily, paying no mind to me, she continued.
Why is it that you know that prayer, even though you're a magus?
Because I'm not, really, a magus.
She grew up in a cemetery, you know?
As if he couldn't hold himself back any longer, my master spoke up. Even he seemed to be extremely tired. A series of murders, the constant glares of the other Magi. It was enough stress to hurt your stomach, even if you weren't as prone to a sore stomach as my master was.
A cemetery?
It's complicated.
I said, retreating further into my hood. I hadn't really come to terms with my old home yet.
Even if I was asked to explain it to someone else, it wasn't really something I had understood or accepted yet for myself. Well, whether it was something I'd ever be able to accept was questionable. After all, the idea of eternal life after death was for those who couldn't accept their life as it was, wasn't it? Throwing me another look, my master spoke again.
Saigen, would you mind taking Miss Rosalind back to her room?
Yeah, sure.
Taking my master's request, Saigen urged Rosalind back to the castle. After watching them go, my master spoke again.
With a ceremony like that, I'm sure he'll make it to heaven, no problem.
Thank you. Hearing my words of thanks, my master snorted lightly.
So it seems like there are people out there who think Magi shouldn't have anything to do with prayers. Even that Amen is directly related to Kabbalah, you know?
My eyes went wide with surprise. Really?
It's a technique called Notarikon. The original phrase would be Adonai Melech Nemen. It means something like our Lord, O faithful King. Taking the initials of this phrase, they ended up with the word Amen. Well, today it's more often translated as so be it.
Maybe that was something that was common knowledge for Magi, but for me, it was surprising.
Though it seems like little Rosalind hasn't learned that much herself yet. When we get back to London, I'll be sure to add a text on the subject to your homework.
I let out a soft whimper as I hung my head, waiting for the lecture to be over. But the fact that we were able to have an exchange like this at all made me a little happy. It reminded me of the time we spent in London before coming to the Castle of Separation. My master shifted his gaze, looking in the direction opposite of where Rosalind and Saigen had disappeared.
Do you have some business with me?
Oh, looks like they're on to me.
With a joking air, Flu came out from his hiding place behind the castle wall. After seeing the astrologer for no more than an instant, my master immediately adopted an exasperated look.
Are you here to pray as well?
Hardly. I was just wondering what kind of amusing prayer a magus would choose to offer. I came to watch around the time you started with the incense.
Without pointing out that that simply meant he had been here the entire time, my master pulled his cigar case from his jacket. Clipping the end of a new cigar off with a knife, he spoke to Flu as if starting a new conversation.
You have a light?
Sure.
Flu raised his hand, and I heard the sharp sound of a metal lid being opened. My master made a faint scowl.
Don't you catch any flack for carrying a Zippo around as a magus?
In this situation? What do you want me to do? Use alchemy to create fire for my own piss.
Huh.
My master's lips turned at the vulgar joke. From what I learned later, the phosphorus that was used to make old matches was discovered from an old alchemical experiment involving evaporating urine. In any case, it was a joke that went well over my head. After taking a long puff from his cigar, my master spoke again.
Has Luviagalita Edelfelt not asked you to do me in?
Oh yeah, she did, didn't she? Though her style is a little bit funny.
Flu seemed to be enjoying himself, shrugging playfully. Hearing this, I unconsciously began to hold my breath, but the two of them continued their conversation as if it was nothing at all.
Her style?
Yeah, that little princess said she wants to bury you in a business perspective. She wants to show the world how powerless and worthless you are. Rather amusingly straightforward, don't you think?
At that, my master's eyes went wide. After blinking a few times,
Well, that's certain. Original.
Show her that face and she'd be ecstatic, I bet. I think she just hates the way you criticize and judge others from your high horse, that's all.
I don't particularly remember ever doing that.
Doesn't matter if you remember, 'cause everyone else does. You should probably try to, though.
In response to Flu's words, my master made an incredibly difficult face.
Feels like it's the other way around to me.
What is?
Never mind.
Shaking his head, my master looked back at the mound where Hein and his Shiri were buried. Heine's armor was smashed to pieces. My master muttered, as if he had just remembered. Before the burial had taken place, he had managed to sneak a look at the body. Hearing that information, Flu stroked his unshaven face.
Sounds like the famous Istari family's living stone isn't such a big deal after all.
It was my first time seeing the real thing, but if it was that solid after the user had died, then I imagine there would be very few magics that would be able to penetrate it while the user was alive. It seemed like there was some instability in the construction formula for the spell. At that weak point, there were signs something like claws had struck through and stabbed him in the chest. It looked very similar to the wounds Miss Adashino suffered. Also similar, there were signs his magic crest had been forcibly removed.
Is that right?
Flu leaned his head forward, as if showing deep interest.
Once again, similar to Miss Adashino's case, it seemed like Heine's body had been moved from the scene of the actual murder.
Right. There weren't really any signs of struggle in that big room, were there?
In that case, whether we're talking about Heine or Miss Adashino, we still don't know where they were actually killed. Which means the possibility the actual scene is related to Ashbourne's secret is fairly high.
Oh, but in that case, why go through all the trouble of moving the bodies there? If you're right, wouldn't it be fine if they just disappeared?
Well...
Before he continued, my master turned around. Beside the mounds of earth where we had offered our prayers earlier, Orlok now sat comfortably in his wheelchair.
Well, the old man enters the scene? You here to play bodyguard? No, not at all. It seems that girl is planning on starting something. I thought I'd invite you to come watch with me.
Hearing that, my master shot Flu a suspicious glare.
You were just here to keep an eye on us, weren't you?
Oh, was I?
Flu replied with an innocent whistle. Ignoring Flu, my master gave me a quick nod before turning to Orlok.
Let's go.
Chapter 4, Part 3. My master and I immediately hurried to Luvia's room. At first glance, her room seemed to have been scrubbed clean of the presence of angels. It had been so well done that it felt like we had actually left the Castle of Separation. Immediately upon entering, I blinked in surprise. Rosalind, Saigon? Because the two who had just barely left our company were already here.
One of the butlers called us!
Rosalind spoke, glancing towards Luvia, standing in the center of the room. Luvia's hair and ringlets looked as if it was spun gold. The deepness of her jewel-like eyes watching us reinforced the mystique of her character. Standing beside her was her Mohican butler, Clown.
Lord El-Melloi II. I thought you would show up sooner or later.
And what exactly are you planning here?
I have decided to put an end to this farce. I've also called Mr. Orlok here. Do you mind if I close the door on this incident now?
A smile was backed by a peerless self-confidence. According to my master, the Edelfelts didn't gain the title of hyenas just for collecting dead bodies. They also tended to hover around conflicts to which they had no claim, swooping in and taking the choice bits for themselves when the opportunity arose. In short, they were naturally adept at sniffing down the best fruit, not through logic, but through some deeper sense.
Put an end to it? There's no way you can...
Oh, but I can. I decided to sit back and just watch before, but that has ended in nothing but useless death.
My master stiffened at the thinly veiled jab. Both he and I were painfully aware that those most hurt and angered by Hishiri and Heine's deaths were in the room with us right now.
Both of them were people our world could not afford to do without. The path of magecraft they pursued may have differed from ours, but a single drop of a Magi's blood is as a single tiny jewel. On top of that, a magus of their level is a treasure that cannot be equaled by any earthly hoard. Even if stagnation and stability are the karmic destinies of our world, they were those who would have served as the foundation for overcoming that destiny and reaching beyond it. Am I mistaken?
Her harsh words and tone coming from such a delicate-seeming body, hit us like a slap in the face. This girl was, beyond a doubt, nobility. Even while solemnly watching the countlessly occurring comedies and tragedies that filled the world, she was never satisfied, still rebelling like a warrior valiantly waving the flag of resistance. I had heard from my master that, in the past, Magi had been kings. The land itself was important for magecraft, so it was common sense for Magi, kings, and other kinds of nobility to attempt to acquire land for themselves. Now, with those sacred grounds held in the iron grip of the Magic Association and other similar organizations, nobility among Magi had declined to simply old names carrying on old traditions. Even so, this girl alone demonstrated those virtues of old. It was faint, but seeing it caused a small pain to well up in my chest. She was completely ensnared by the past too, so why was she able to march forward so boldly? Dry laughter rang out from the back of the room. It seemed like Orlok had finally arrived. It looked like her anger, and indeed, the rituals she had prepared were endlessly interesting for him.
Ooh. Why don't we let her give it a shot? Whether she succeeds or fails, it will still end up as a clue for us, no?
My master's silence was short. Adjusting his cigar with a finger, he raised his head and spoke.
And how are you going to do it?
Lou and I found a hidden room.
A hidden room?
My master's brow furrowed at the claim.
Yes, thanks to that, we were able to find the foundational formula the entire Castle of Separation was built on, though confirming the contents and building our own answer to it took a considerable amount of time.
Build an answer?
With a gentle smile, she opened her hand, revealing a single jewel.
All the rooms, all the hallways, all the magic circuits running through the castle are now buried in this jewel. It took me almost half a day to finish.
My master's eyes went wide at the realization of what that meant.
Wait, you don't mean…
Precisely. I've decided to take the workshop that is the Castle of Separation for myself.
Just hearing her say it aloud left me speechless. She was like a parasite. Or maybe closer to the computer viruses I had heard about since coming to London. Even I, who knew next to nothing about magecraft, could instinctively feel the dreadfulness of those words. A workshop was something a magus created after years, decades, generations of labor. If a magic crest was an artificial organ, then a workshop was like an artificial world. It was a method of pure brute force. While my master attempted to break everything down and solve every mystery of the castle, even if it was as a magus, Luvia had taken on the entire castle at once in half a day. It was like Don Quixote, taking up arms against a windmill. No, in this case the old knight's delusion would have been real. He would be fighting a giant with naught but a sword.
Once I do this, revealing the culprit, or the curse, or whatever, will be as nothing with my jewels. Is there any simpler method than this?
You should know how high of a level this workshop is, even if you are an Edelfelt.
No.
For the briefest instant, a look of faint fear passed over her features. The instant passed, and all that was left was the burning gaze of a challenger facing down her greatest opponent.
Behold the skill of the Edelfelt family.
Luvia, Jalita.
Before he could stop her, she raised her right hand to her side.
Awaken. Call.
Her beautiful lips whispered. The sapphire at the tips of her fingers, held like a knight's salute, began to glow, causing the other jewels to glow along with it. While it gave the impression of lighting the fuse of a bomb, it reminded me of the inside of one of the Royal British Museum's cabinets of curiosity as the brilliant, multicolored light filled the space around her. It was a magic circle made of jewels. As if the activated spell was serving double duty as a barrier of some sort, my master's extended hand was blown back with a noise like a thunderclap. Smiling in satisfaction, Luvia whispered again.
Awaken. Call.
The first step was the area around Luvia herself. The magic circle slowly began to rotate. The magical energy took the form of a spiral as it span. From a combination of my master's explanation after the fact and my own intuitions, it seemed like what Luvia was trying to do was like a puzzle. For example, when given the equation 3 + 4 = 5, laid out in matches, and you have to make the equation correct by moving only a single match. It was taking the original foundational formula underlying the Castle of Separation and using Jules and her own magical energy, making the smallest possible change that would change the entire formula. Of course, the scope and complexity of the task weren't even comparable to that of the match puzzle. The scope was the entire Castle of Separation, and the magic circles had to be precise enough that not even an ant could slip through unnoticed. No matter how many jewels she used as boosters, it was like trying to use a fire hose to make a sculpture a few dozen feet in front of you. But
Call, connect green 7 to red 8, excite red 10, and circulate to blue 4. Blue 6, connect with blue 7, 9, 11, and red 5, 6, 25, connect with green and red 11. Thou shalt be my guide.
the incantation continued. The second step was the entire room. The spiraling magical energy raised its head as if it were a snake. The jewels already embedded throughout the castle began to respond, and the magical energy suffusing the area began to whirl as if in a dance. Following the movements of the magical energy in the air, the entire castle began to vibrate, growing to an easily recognizable trembling. My master looked up at the ceiling.
The whole castle?
Whoa! Don't tell me you're actually gonna pull it off?
Even Flu, who had supposedly helped her, gave a whistle in disbelief. Even to these men, who had already seen countless mysteries, this was a scene that was hard to accept. Livia Galita Edelfelt's magecraft was reaching for that impossible place that could only be described in the terms of genius. Would she make it? Orlok, meanwhile, narrowed his eyes without a word.
Awaken Grace. Call Grace.
The third step immediately expanded to cover the entire castle. Each glowing light expanded to connect to another, and the lights formed themselves into magic circles. Each of these circles continued to expand further, connecting with other circles, growing into ever larger, more complex forms. Without damaging the magic circles that were already present, she was trying to rewrite them with new meanings. Every time one was completed, the jewels around Luvia gained a rainbow-colored light. Already over 80% of them had changed color, and when they had all finished changing, it would likely signify complete control of the castle falling into Luvia's hands. As if the Castle of Separation was accepting its new master, an enormous magic circle span down into the room, approaching Luvia. Even I, who wasn't a magus, could feel the flood of magical energy inundate the room on my skin.
It is done.
My master, however, groaned with a very different emotion.
No. This isn't the kind of reaction you should be getting.
At the same time, Luvia's body began to sway and collapse. It wasn't just her. Either Flu, Clown, and even Saigon crouched to the floor, as if trying to restrain their own bodies. Even the old magus was no exception. With a grunt of surprise, he was torn from his wheelchair and thrown to the ground. No, even I was the same. Overcome by an illusionary pain in my right hand, as if it had been set on fire, it was like every nerve in my body had turned against me. Those nerves which had kept me alive my whole life were cut off from my body, and before I could even think of resisting, my vision rapidly began to dim.
Gray!
Even those words seemed to be coming from painfully far away. Immediately to Luvia's side, a deep darkness welled up in the air. As if to devour the girl who had fainted, the darkness opened its jaws.
Damn it!
The last thing I saw was my master's hand reaching for the breast pocket in his jacket, and after that my consciousness snapped off as my master Luvia and I were all pulled into that darkness. Chapter 4, Part 4, of course. It was in the Castle of Separation. The scenery before my eyes was that familiar dining table, where all of the Magi invited to the castle shared breakfast that first morning. A number of figures were sitting at that table now, knives and forks in hand, laughing happily like they were a part of a shadow puppet show.
Huh. If you try and connect the magic circle like this, it won't even last a year before it falls apart. Your magecraft is as sloppy as ever, isn't it?
The one who spoke, shrugging his shoulders, was Orlok Krasermund. He wasn't in a wheelchair. Despite the fact he was clearly an elderly man, there was no doubting that it was a younger Orlok than the one I knew. Looks aside, His manner of speaking was certainly much more playful than what I was used to. Looking at him now, one wouldn't be able to believe the profound wickedness I was used to seeing wrapped around him.
Wanted? Is that a problem?
Yes, is. Just like your face.
Shut up, you deathless old bag.
Is that really any way to talk to Mr. Orlock, dear? He did come all the way out here just to help you.
A woman sitting with them spoke. She was a beautiful woman with curly hair. The simple linen dress she wore suited her perfectly.
Why, thank you, miss.
Thank you for your help, Mr. Orlock.
Something was wrong. Dash, this wasn't my memory at all. Dash, the thing eating away at me was from someone else.
Ah, so you finally figured it out. That's right. This is the only way. You knew that from the beginning. Why didn't you realize?
Who is this? Who is this? Who is this person?
Your magic crest is now...
A hand reached out, and then, with a snap as if a reel of film had been cut, my memory shut off once more. There was a warm sensation on my face. Thinking about it, it felt like that warmth was the last thing keeping me secure. Returning the gaze from the dull, weary eyes that were watching me, I replied in a vacant whisper. Master.
Finally, you're awake!
He replied with sigh, pulling back his hand, fixing my hood back into place. He then smacked me on the forehead. Ow.
Keep your hood up. I already told you I don't want to see that face.
Oh, okay. With an apology, I held my hood tightly in place as I sat up. I feel like I saw a dream about the castle of separation.
Oh? If you of all people saw it, then by all means I'd love to hear about it later. Unfortunately, we're not quite in a position where we can relax like that. It seems we're trapped, probably thanks to some sort of defense mechanism of the castle.
Finally, I realized. Everything within my field of vision was stained a thick black. The few meters around us retained the stone floor I was familiar with, but even that was slowly vanishing into the encroaching darkness.
I created a boundary field at the last second, but in the end we were sucked in by an even bigger one. It's not quite spatial partitioning, but the effect is similar, I suppose. The area we were in was shifted ever so slightly towards the astral plane. If we had been completely taken in, we probably would have had a difficult time surviving, what with physical bodies and all. It would be similar to trying to survive after being dumped in the ocean.
Then we...
Since it's not a spatial partition, it should be fairly simple to shift us back into the correct plane. All it would take is to punch through with a large amount of magical energy. However...
That's unfortunate, isn't it?
A third voice called out. It was Luvia.
Is it? As a second-rate magus myself, I was hoping to put my hopes on the Edelfelt Magecraft.
See for yourself.
Luvia raised her right hand. On her outstretched palm were arrayed a number of jewels. Each of them held a somber darkness that even I could tell with a single glance meant they were completely empty of magical energy. As if frustrated, Luvia tossed the darkened gems to the floor.
The result of that impact from before? My magic crest isn't functioning yet.
Your magic crest?
As my master repeated back her words, Luvia averted her eyes as if embarrassed.
I tried to fight back with my jewels and magecraft, but not even my Gandra had any effect on that darkness. I lost a number of jewels trying, too.
Her face twisted in frustration. She wasn't shaking because she was afraid for her life. It was simply her soul itself rejecting the shame she had earned from her failure. It seemed this girl was nobility right down to the bone.
Why did you save me?
She muttered, lips quivering at the humiliation she couldn't bear.
Who knows?
The one who failed was me and me alone. How far must you insult me?
Watching Luvia get worked up with rage, my master sighed and raised his index finger.
I feel the same way you do. You lamented Haine Istari's death earlier, didn't you? I felt the same way. The loss, the waste of a talent like his is too much. Do you have any complaints about an answer like that?
You think that kind of an excuse will pass?
If we're talking about pure talent, then I could count on one hand the number of magi I've met who might be able to surpass you. If you believe there are people whose talent this world cannot do without, then surely you belong on that list yourself.
Luvia's mouth opened as if she wanted to say something, but in the end, she just dropped her shoulders.
I guess I can't argue with that.
Her face was like one who had finally been released from some sort of ghostly possession. Taking out a new jewel, she scrutinized it carefully on her palm.
With the jewels I have left, I shall create a simple magic circle. We should be able to escape using that.
I guess that will take a little time, won't it? In that case, I'll take a short nap. Not like I can do anything to help anyways.
Excuse me?
I'll leave the rest to you then.
With that, my master dropped down to sit cross-legged and closed his eyes. In a matter of seconds, his breathing fell into the steady rhythm of sleep. Sure, meditation and sleep management were fundamental skills for Magi, but why did he have to be so good at only these incredibly basic abilities? Now alone with a girl who seemed likely to explode at any instant, I could do nothing more than tremble in fear. Meanwhile, in the guest room, another incident was occurring.
Lady Luvia?
Luvia's faithful servant Clown lay on the carpet, gripping it tightly in an attempt to prevent his consciousness from slipping away. He also had noticed that his magic crest had ceased to function. Clown himself was from a family that had supported the Edelfelts for generations. The Lord El-Melloi II Case Files. Chapter 4. Cast by Artale Studio. Please subscribe to our channel if you enjoy listening. Generations and as such had succeeded the family's magic crest as normal. However, with the loss of function in his magic crest, the nerves that served it were also shutting down, and threatened to take his consciousness with them. Though his appearance of having fainted was somewhat of an act, he still couldn't move his body. Despite the current crisis, the stopped nerves in his body refused to carry any signals from his brain. His expertly tempered body and magecraft were of no use to him in this situation where his body refused to move. Even as his heart shivered with chagrin, his faintly remaining consciousness continued to struggle to mobilize his body, even if only one finger at a time. In the midst of the lingering effects of the previous shockwave, a single shadow moved.
What was...
Rosalind Istari hesitantly turned, looking around the room. If that was the case, then the reason they couldn't move.
Cryantpea, the magic crests.
If that impact had been targeting those with magic crests, then it was no wonder that Rosalind hadn't been affected, seeing as she didn't possess one. But that didn't mean she was safe. From his position on the floor, Clown could see the shadow that entered into the room, as if cloaked in some sort of magecraft. Even in broad daylight, its form was hidden in darkness. With frightening speed, the beast approached on all fours.
Ashbourne's beast.
Paralyzed as he was, Clown wasn't able to say anything further. Chapter 4. Part 5. Momentary Contracts. Having cut her own finger, Luvia was rubbing jewels across the stone beneath her. Even though it was only improvised, the magic circles she was drawing held a considerable amount of magical energy. According to a lecture my master had given earlier, a large portion of magecraft was divided into 3 categories. At the simpler end, simply passing magic energy through the magic circuits and releasing it were single action spells. Above that, consisting of a simple incantation and realizing a single mystery, was a 1 count. The final designation, once the spell contained more than 10 lines and functioned as a sort of pseudo-ritual, were 10 counts. So in short, since a single action spell had proved insufficient to break through the boundary field, she was making preparations for something bigger. The strained atmosphere between us was almost painful. The majority of the hostility was directed from Luvia towards my still sleeping master, but with me sitting between them, I felt like I was resting on a bed of nails myself. While it was true that I was basically a professional shut-in, and I had given up trying to understand others a long time ago, even I was willing to completely sell out of that lifestyle if it meant relief from Luvia's mounting fury. Thinking there must be something that we could talk about, I decided to try my luck. Thinking about it now, what you were doing earlier was kind of like hacking, wasn't it?
Hacking?
It was something I only heard about from movies I saw after coming to London.
Call the Trojan Horse. It's a program used to infiltrate another person's computer and then, as necessary, steal control of the system.
Ah, I see. And it's named after the Trojan horse, the one used during the battle for Troy to sneak soldiers into the enemy kingdom. Inside were Odysseus, Ajax the Lesser, Menelaus, Diomedes, all heroes of considerable renown. Thinking of Troy being destroyed from within like that, it makes one shudder.
It seemed Luvia was more interested in the original myth, the Trojan War. Among all the Greek myths, it was the most often spoken of in literature. In the past, the priest in my home village told me the story, that the deciding factor in the war had been the Trojan horse. Hidden inside the enormous wooden horse were a number of veteran soldiers, and after it was carried into the kingdom, only the obvious could have happened.
Well, speaking from that basic concept, the analogy is pretty accurate, whether it's talking about computers or magecraft. Past or present, in the end, they're just tools used by humans.
Don't you think the reason no one respects you as a lord is because you keep saying things like that?
Well,
In response to Luvia's jab, my master fell silent. That silence persisted for an unexpectedly long period of time. It was so oppressive it gave the feeling that maybe he had suddenly choked on something. Even I, who was normally rather bitter with my master, felt a little bad for him. Master? I don't think you need to take it so personally.
I see. That's it. That was the piece that was missing.
Huh. Ignoring me, my master turned to Luvia.
Luvia Gelida Edelfelt, is the magic circle ready yet?
What? I suppose the preparations are mostly complete, though there hasn't been time to climatize yet.
Luvia looked up at my master's sudden outburst, apparently taken completely off guard.
We need to get out of here as soon as possible, by any means necessary.
What? What are you talking?
As Luvia gave my master a look like he had just gone mad, he continued to press her ruthlessly.
If we don't get out of here immediately, not only all of us, but everyone that was left behind in the castle will be killed.
Just as he finished speaking, an uneasy noise arose from the darkness around us. As if the air itself was hardening, a repulsive pressure began to press in on our lungs.
This is...
Luvia spoke, looking around. The boundary field deployed around us was beginning to lose to the pressure. Of course, the boundary field had been an improvised construction by my master, so it wasn't that surprising that it only took a little effort to break through it.
It seems to be responding to our actions. Apparently, it's not interested in just leaving us here to do as we wish. And with a boundary like this, even physical force would likely have no difficulty pushing through.
This isn't a joke.
Luvia shouted fiercely as she stood, raising a finger towards the darkness.
Call blue, red, green for your queen.
On one count, like the wind of a raging storm, Luvia's remaining jewels unleashed a gatling torrent of Gandre.
The rainbow-colored light washed over the ground with a terrible beauty, driving out the darkness with pure force. As the light was briefly swallowed in darkness, it made me think of the first words left behind by God, "Let there be light." However, the blackness did not relent. As if it was eagerly devouring the barrage of magical bullets Luvia was unleashing, the encroaching darkness began to accelerate towards us.
Don't mess with me.
Luvia screamed. Without pause, she tapped into her ode, and the magical bullets were fired once again. The multicolored display was breathtaking in its beauty, but it was clear to see that the resolve that backed it was more tragic than anything. Never mind ordinary magecraft, The level of output she was producing must have been like a blasting furnace in her nerves. As her magic circuits continued to burn, they screamed for rest. Normally, the magic crest would assist with magecraft like this, but Luvia hadn't mentioned whether the crest had returned to working order yet. Seeing her struggle on, my master spoke again.
Luvia. What? Do you plan on telling me you'd rather just die now?
Even having reached this point, there wasn't a speck of despair in her eyes. There was nothing there but a blazing fervor, like a scarlet jewel. To this girl, facing down utter despair, my master spoke.
Don't think of them as stones, but as mud.
What?
Luvia's brow twisted with rage. Had he waited for another second, she likely would have turned her attack on him. But he didn't wait another second. Instead, he reached out and grabbed her wrist.
What do you think you're...
I'm talking about the jewels. I presume you can feel the pulse from within the ruby, but that's only half of the power you should be using.
What?
Normally, those were the kind of words she would brush off with a laugh. Even if my master was a lord, Luvia still bore the pride of generations of the Delphelt family. The fact she was willing to lay that pride aside for even a moment signified a major change within her.
We were talking about it before. The true nature of the Edelfelt magecraft is not in taking pride in value. It's the circulation of that value. Wind already blows. Water already flows. While the jewel symbolizes your heart, it also symbolizes everything in the outside world. Even that darkness is just a part of that everything. Water flows from high to low. Electricity moves from high to low. That flow of power is the essence of your magecraft. Just as you draw out the power of the jewel with each beat of your heart, feel also the power of the depth within that darkness.
It was like listening to a sports doctor give advice to a professional athlete. However, he didn't stop at just giving her academic advice. As Luvia realized what he had done after grabbing her wrist, her eyebrows shot upwards.
Are you connecting to my magic circuits?
Even just hearing those words made me shudder. Meanwhile, my master's response was to shout.
If you're going to reject it, then reject it.
The words my master was speaking showed a demonstrable lack of sanity. Because when connecting to someone's magic circuits, the receiver of the connection had absolute control. For a magus of even middling ability, they would easily be able to manipulate, or even burn out, the connected magus's circuits. If the whim struck her, Luvia could destroy his magic circuits from the inside out with barely a thought. Considering how magic circuits connected to the nerves of the body, it was similar to putting his live heart in her hands, but she didn't. As magical energy flowed through my master's circuits into Luvia, even I could tell that her internal image had changed. Completely different from the Luvia that had been standing there just a moment before, this Luvia controlled the flow of magic with a natural gentleness. Flow, that was the true essence of her magecraft, my master had said.
Do you understand? Your attempt to take control of the Castle of Separation didn't fail. Rather, because you succeeded, the security system was triggered. That being the case, there are magic circles you've created even outside this darkness. Be conscious of yourself that is both within the barrier here and outside of it, and the you that is the barrier.
How much did Luvia hear his words? Maybe. With their circuits connected as they were, words were unnecessary between them from the start.
Your affinity is earth. From the 4 classifications in physics, your starting point is cold and dry. From that point, flow to warm and dry fire, warm and wet wind, cold and wet water. Gather them together and take control. Taking that power in hand, through the lens of modern magecraft, call for the angel. The angels you should gather are already there.
Suddenly, the magic energy spinning around Luvia seemed to jump to another level. Guided by my master's magic energy, a new spiral of magic energy began to wind around Luvia's body, and everything began to speed up. At the end of the 2's connected magic circuits, the jewel in Luvia's hand began to glow even brighter. Even the darkness around us began to glow from within, as if it was yet another of her jewels. Just as lightning needed to break through the insulation in the air and create a path for itself before striking, the magic energy Luvia was controlling was attempting to break through the darkness and create a path before Luvia released her spell. But, an instant before, I heard the unpleasant sound of liquid splattering on the floor. Matching with the glowing ruby, the back of my master's hand was dyed a deep red. Master!
Are you?
As Luvia and I called out.
Don't worry about it. It's just some nerves and blood vessels failing from my circuits using magecraft I'm not accustomed to.
My master cut us off, his face expressionless. Even as the unfamiliar magecraft tore apart his nerves and blood vessels, my master didn't so much as tremble. As his control of Luvia's magical energy became more and more precise, he just continued to watch the encroaching darkness. To me it felt like those eyes gave the impression of a smoldering ember.
Fire!
In response to his shout, Luvia responded with a spell.
Awaken. Call.
With those words, the bullet was released. In an instant, the accumulated light surged forward, scouring away the darkness. It was like watching glass smash. Suddenly, our vision was overwhelmed with color. Did we make it? With a stagger, I stood up. It seemed like we were in a hallway a little removed from the guest room. Streaming through a nearby window was the light of the early afternoon sun, filtered through the peaks of distant mountains.
It seems like the attack which destroyed the boundary field also threw our coordinates off a little bit.
Luvia patted down her dress as she awkwardly rose from the floor. Even after using magecraft of that caliber, she didn't seem even the slightest bit tired. She was clearly well beyond the level of even a first-class magus when it came to the strength of her magic circuits. Suddenly, my hair began to stand on end. Nearby, I could see my master standing up, but with the way he looked, I had doubted for a moment that it was even him. Wiping the blood from his hand with a handkerchief, his figure seemed unusually full of emotion. Master? Master? Ever since we had arrived at the Castle of Separation, Luvia had shown us at least some degree of animosity. But my master had never returned that hate, no. My master had never shown this level of murderous intent towards anyone before.
You're all cowards, you know that?
It was like those words had oozed up from the bottom of his stomach.
It is the nature of a prodigy to soar above the heads of others. I am simply flying freely through the sky I imagined for myself.
She replied with heavy, painful words. When it came to my master, magecraft was simply that important to him. Even if it was a secret he hid in his usual behavior, how much must it have hurt to be shown such a level that he wouldn't be able to reach, even if he struggled to the end of time? For a while, Luvia was silent.
I have no intention of forgiving you either, not even if the sky were to fall.
An old European expression, often used in Celtic or other Northern European cultures when giving an oath. It was an expression I was already familiar with. However, coming from Luvia, it carried the weight of an act of mythic proportions. Taking a small breath, Luvia looked at my master once again.
That being said, may I ask you a question?
Do as you like.
10 years ago, when your teacher, Lord El-Melloi Archibald, died, how did you feel?
Hearing that question, I felt my heart jump. She was asking about the Fourth Holy Grail War when my master killed his own teacher, a time even I knew nothing about.
You probably won't believe me anyways, but the one who killed Kenneth wasn't me. His killers were a heroic spirit of the sword, and her master. I didn't even see how he died, but after I learned that he had died, well, I guess in the end I felt sad.
Sad?
Having lost someone of that incredible talent for no reason. Never being able to see things from his perspective even once. I was sad. That's all there is to it. Sorry I don't have a more elegant way of putting it.
I see.
Beneath the sunlight, Luvia closed her eyes. After a few seconds, she opened her eyes again, and in a dignified voice made this proclamation.
In that case, I shall have you become my tutor.
What? Wait, hold on a second. You're the one who called me a destroyer of magecraft.
I did, and that thought hasn't changed. However, I am willing to concede that there is more to you than just that. Besides, you have become too familiar with the Edelfelt family's magecraft. Having connected directly to my magic circuits is no different from having laid your hands on our family's deepest secrets. Knowing this much about us, there is no way I can just leave you be. Of course, were you willing to become my tutor, I might just forget it ever happened. Yes, especially since I will be attending the clock tower from next year.
What?
Once again, my master was struck dumbfounded. Luvia's thinking was perfect for a magus. However, it was so correct, it served more to set her apart from other magi. In a world of magi who clung to the darkness and the night, a girl like her who relied on a full frontal assault anyone in the world could understand was more like defective merchandise. As I stood to the side, unable to do anything but dart my eyes back and forth in confusion, an unexpectedly pleasant sound split the air. My master laughed. Even in this situation, he laughed like he had forgotten everything.
You're pretty honest, aren't you?
What?
The way you do things, you're so straightforward.
My master's words left Luvia speechless. It seemed to me like her ears were starting to turn red, but I wasn't sure. Averting her gaze, she finally asked again.
Anyways, what is your response?
I'll think about it. Regardless, if you were to just simply apply to the Faculty of Modern Magecraft, there wouldn't be anything I could do to stop you. Though I can't guarantee you'd get in.
Oh, you think there's a possibility I might not?
However, both of them had already turned their attention to a different matter.
First, we must deal with this incident, I suppose.
Right. First, we have to put an end to the Castle of Separation. Are you ready, Gray?
Yes? Taken by surprise, by suddenly being called on, I nodded repeatedly. Chapter 5, Part 1. Returning to the guest room, the scene before us was appalling, taken to the extreme. The walls and furniture of the room were painted thickly with blood, and there were so many chunks of meat scattered across the floor it was difficult to find a place to stand. Luvia covered her mouth for only an instant before dashing into the room.
Clown.
My lady.
The manservant managed to rise to his knees. It seemed like even breathing was painful for him.
I'm sorry.
His words gave the impression of a rotten, long-dead tree. It seemed the shock that had disabled Luvia's crest had had a similar effect on her bodyguard. No, if you compared them, Luvia's condition was much less serious. Maybe he had somehow managed to protect her to some degree after all.
What happened?
Immediately after you disappeared, a beast appeared and took Miss Rosalind away. Saigon also went after them.
A beast? So there was actually something.
Luvia's gaze moved as she spoke. In another corner of the room, Flu sat on the floor, wheezing. It seemed he also had managed to survive the encounter. Looking at the knives scattered around, it appeared as if he had hidden himself within some kind of barrier. As if he was having difficulty focusing his eyes, he was repeatedly massaging the area around his eyebrows.
That monster knew exactly what it was doing too. Before we could even move properly, it aimed straight for the most dangerous one of us. I didn't even get to see the thing.
Then, this is...
In response to my master's question, Flu nodded.
Yeah, this is all old man Orlok.
The astrologer named the completely unidentifiable corpse. Literally torn limb from limb, it was so bad we couldn't even identify which parts of his body each piece was from. The third victim. But this was no longer a crime scene. It was more like a natural disaster. Not even that old magus could escape from the rage of the Castle of Separation. But...
Orlok, Kiesermund.
Standing in the middle of the guest room, my master called out. Confused by what my master thought he was accomplishing, I turned to face him. Master, what are you?
I'm not talking about the corpse. I'm talking to you, Orlok Kiesermund.
In response to his words, another nearby figure began to slowly get up off the floor. It was Orlok's assistant.
You're the real Orlok Kiesermund, right?
What? As I looked at Orlok's assistant with bewildered eyes, my mental picture of him collapsed. Lifting the corners of his mouth still soaked in his master's blood, the boy whose expression had never before changed, smiled sweetly.
Calling me the real Orlok is a bit off the mark, my young lord.
I gulped unconsciously. Though his bearing and voice were completely different, there was no doubt that those words came from Orlok Kiesermund. Their speech patterns weren't just similar, they were exactly the same.
I only transcribed my memory and personality. I suppose there was only about 1/10 of me or so left in that body anyways.
The boy Orlok laughed.
So papillo magia is that sort of magecraft, is it?
I'd love to call you keen-eyed, but couldn't you let that old body have the glory for a little longer?
The boy said, spinning his finger around. Papilio magia was a style of magecraft that imitated the process of a caterpillar turning into a chrysalis and then after a series of changes, emerging as a butterfly. If that was the case, then this kind of revival wasn't all that unexpected. But hearing about it and seeing it happen before you were completely different things. In this case, the change was so unexpected I could do nothing but moan pitifully.
This body is a homunculus made from my blood and sperm anyways. Originally the plan was to transfer my personality over with my magic crest little by little, but thanks to that process being interrupted, I lost a good 1/10 of it. From that strange attack earlier, about half of the remaining crest was disabled, you see.
In reality, losing 1/10 of a magic crest was nothing to take so lightly. For a crest with a history such as his, losing that 1/10 was like losing decades of progress that had cost his predecessors their entire lives. However, with Orlok already being on the edge of senility, maybe the situation was different. The way he spoke, it was almost like he was relieved. Meanwhile, my master finished biting his lip and spoke.
I have a question I'd like to ask you about that.
Oh?
As the boy tilted his head to the side, Luvia cut in between them.
El-Melloi II. Before that, we have the urgent matter of hunting down this beast.
That won't be necessary. We can make a bet on it if you want, but that creature will lay a finger on Rosalind.
Leisurely, my master brushed his bangs out of his eyes. His voice held a deep tiredness to it, but it seemed like I might have been the only one to notice it. Squinting his eyes at the sunlight streaming through the broken window, my master spoke as if squeezing the words out from the bottom of his heart.
So, let's put an end to all of this.
Chapter 5, Part 2. The sun dropped completely below the horizon, and the castle of separation was cloaked in darkness. Being a castle nestled within the mountains, it wasn't really one that could be used for a traditional battle. The closest village was easily 10 kilometers out, and the only way to reach it was to follow animal trails through the forest. No matter how much of a mountaineer you were, in this situation, there was no getting in or out. Of course, that made no difference to it. Crawling up the walls of the castle like a spider, it took a position near the top of the bell tower and listened carefully. Its objective was a single person. The flames of hatred that burned in its lungs wouldn't die as long as that person still lived. It understood that so much it was painful, but that pain only sharpened its resolve. No matter what happened here, the one thing it couldn't allow was for that person to escape. In order to prevent that possibility, it opened all its nerves and magic circuits wide. The castle of separation itself was its ally. Wherever there were angels, so were its hands and eyes. Those eyes quickly discovered a familiar wandering near the walls of the castle. A butterfly. Several butterflies, shining with an ephemeral light, fluttered around the grounds of the castle. The castle gardens, the walls, even the keep entrance was surrounded with them. No doubt, they were attempting to secure an escape route. Either way, it seemed the familiars were just being used to look around for now. Those butterflies, there was no mistaking it. The fact that that old Magus was still alive was beyond its wildest expectations, but all it meant was that it would have to kill him again. The ritual could continue after that was accomplished. So, it turned its ears toward finding the source of those butterflies. The sound caused by the activation of magecraft was something that couldn't be avoided. On top of that, the magical energy used had unique effects on the sound waves themselves, and it knew from experience how to turn that knowledge into an advantage. If it could capture a single one of those butterflies, it could use it to find a path directly to its master. It didn't know how that master was hiding itself, but it would just have to drag him out anyways. It began walking across the wall. Its destination was the castle keep. If there was one thing it had confidence in, it was its own agility. As far as it was concerned, getting from the wall to the keep was no more difficult than breathing. Immediately beside the entrance to the keep, a butterfly fluttered upwards, completely unaware of its presence. Unable to suppress its glee, its lips curled into a smile as it reached a hand out towards the familiar. An instant later, there was light. Taken off guard by the unexpected brightness, it flinched. It was like a vampire suddenly thrust into the sunlight.
As expected, here it is.
In the boy's hand was a rusted copper lantern, apparently taken from somewhere within the castle. The scent of burning oil rapidly filled the air.
Of course, I'm sure there is other valuable prey as well, but there was no way it would let its number one target escape. Now is there?
From behind the boy, several magi stepped forward. Not one of them attempted to hide the surprise on their faces.
Wait, what's going on here?
It's exactly what it looks like.
The boy lifted the lantern up. The wavering light of the lantern clearly illuminated the figure of a man. Even without his head wrap or his conch, his figure was unmistakable. His face, which normally gave the impression of an idiot even with his eye patch, was somehow softened by the darkness of the night. If it had been anywhere else, lifting another old lantern up high. Lord El-Melloi II made his declaration.
The culprit is you, Tokituji Segan, or should I say, Garion Ashbourne's son, Grenade Ashbourne?
From the darkness of the night, I slowly peeked my head out to watch. There were already 5 magi gathered in the entrance of the castle of Separation's keep. My master, Luvia, Flu, Orlok, now in the figure of a young boy, and finally, Tokituji Segan. The first 4 had all been standing concealed within the forest of the front gardens by magic circles, as I was now. Clown alone was inside the keep, in case of an emergency situation.
The one who had set up the circles had been Flu, though he complained that setting up multiple copies of the same circle in a single area made them weaker. In the end, he was the most skilled of any of us when it came to directional magecraft, so my master had been able to persuade him. Flu's eyes now were darting back and forth like mad.
Whoa, are you serious? Sure, I can buy that he's the culprit, but you're saying he's Ashbourne's son on top of that?
Don't you... Yeah, what are you talking about? No matter how you look at it, I don't really match the pattern, don't you think?
My master gave a small sigh. Lowering the lantern to his feet, he cleared his throat.
Then, shall I explain everything from the beginning?
The night wind blew, bringing with it the sound of the leaves rustling in the nearby trees. It was like listening to the voices of fairies. Or maybe, being the castle of Separation, it would be more appropriate to call them the whispers of angels. Lord Quo Vadis, where was he, who was fit to sit on the throne of judgment before us? My master reached into his jacket and pulled out the invitation.
First of all, what is this invitation?
What is it? It's for the selection of Ashbourne's heir, is it not?
Let's be more direct. Why were we gathered here at this castle? A riddle game, to determine who was suitable to inherit Ashbourne's secrets. That's way too far removed from the normal nature of a magus. Every one of you should be painfully aware of that.
No, that was wrong. The one who was painfully aware of that was none other than my master.
That no matter how much he pursued magecraft from the avenue of knowledge, he would never get even a step closer to it. It was the opposite, really. The more you pursued knowledge of it, the more you would understand that it was a fruitless path to pursue. Why do you think I was able to bear that pain? I have no idea. Or maybe he knew that's how it would be from the start.
What was the point of all of us coming here then?
The why done it. Maybe nothing else, but at least the reason I understand. No, maybe it would be better to say I understood the whole time. All it was a magus passing on his inheritance to his child. Nothing more.
Silence fell. Everyone present could sympathize with that reality. As a magus, that was just the way things worked. But at the same time, in this case, it was a logic that just didn't seem to apply.
Lord El-Melloi X? Are you just crazy or something? First of all, this is the first time I've heard that I'm Garion Ashbourne's kid. I... definitely dead. Were you saying that the corpse I saw was a fake?
Just like Orlok said, that was no doubt Granite Ashbourne's own dead body.
What are you telling me this kid is Orlok? The hell?
The very fact that Gerion Ashbourne's son died is what set this whole incident in motion. The Master of Restoration. who was capable of even restoring damaged magic crests.
The Master of Restoration, rare even among the world of Magi, one who could restore a magic crest to its original state, an existence incomparable to that of an ordinary tuner.
Have you ever heard of the stories of people who displayed strange characteristics after receiving heart or liver transplants, like changes in personality or strange new memories that reflect the organ's original owner?
Transplant surgery. After receiving a serious transplant like a heart, the recipient would suddenly have a change in their tastes or personality, or would suddenly develop a talent for the piano, despite never having even touched one before. Even I had heard of news like that from magazines I had read, though they sounded more like urban legends to me.
Wait, when did we start talking about organ transplants? Ashbourne's secret was supposed to be about restoring magic crests.
And what materials are necessary to do so? What could possibly serve to fill the gaps in a damaged magic crest? What would be most suitable to replace a part of a magic crest that has been lost?
If you want me to say other magic crests, then you've got a fundamental misunderstanding. It's specifically a magic crest because it isn't compatible with others, no?
Papiliomaya. It wasn't my master that had spoken. It was me. Without noticing that the gathered magi had all turned their attention to me, I began to recall the important details. The Master of Restoration, who restores damaged magic crests. A magic crest, a thing similar to a person's organ. Papiliomagia, a mystery aimed at creating a cocoon like a caterpillar, only to emerge later as a butterfly, a completely different being. If that was true, and Saigon was actually Grenade Ashbourne.
Orlaki, Caesarmund. You said you had done research with the owner of this castle, did you not? I guess we now know what kind of research that was.
Orla couldn't answer immediately. Instead, Saigon rose his voice with an angry yell.
This is ridiculous.
Is that so? That's a pretty un-Magus-like thing to say.
My master turned his gaze on the shouting Saigon as if he was playing dumb. Then he took out a leather-covered notebook.
This is something Miss Luvia discovered in one of Ashbourne's hidden rooms earlier. It seems like a list of people who had their magic crest restored. Tokuto Jirubu Saigon. Your name is listed right here.
What?
Saigon's voice turned from anger to surprise. In contrast, my master continued his lecture without slowing. You've already had measures taken to restore your magic crest at this very castle. Even in the dark, I could see Saigon's face turn pale. Like the falling of an executioner's axe, my master's words continued on unabated.
It's almost like a resurrection, but even if the memories and emotions are transferred, it's still a different person. All you've done is written the same data to a different hard disk. It comes close to the level of true magic, but it doesn't quite reach. Anyone who uses a similar magecraft should be well aware of that.
How embarrassing. Unfortunately, yes, the third magic is still quite a ways off.
So it goes without saying that a magecraft that can't even reach the level of Papiliomagia has no chance of making it there.
Interspersed with Orlok's commentary, my master's voice took a decidedly chilly tone.
The result was that the deceased Grenade Ashbourne was torn apart. Then, he was mixed in with the ingredients used to restore magic crests and implanted in your body.
Like a hacker, or the Trojan horse.
You're joking, right? I'm Saigon, you know? Tokuto Jirubu Saigon?
I've already explained that. There's no contradiction between what I've just said and you believing that anyways. If you want to deny it, you'll need better evidence than that. Also, I suppose I should add it removes the credibility of your alibi for Heine's murder, doesn't it? If you're Granite Ashbourne, then it's only a matter of course that the servants would gladly conspire to create an alibi for you. That also explains why we all weren't killed at once, right? After killing your victim, it probably takes about a full day to process and preserve the crest that's removed from their body. The whole scenario of a ritual involving the angelic names was just to avoid casting suspicion on the fact that we were killed one by one. And to keep that illusion going, Hishiri and Heine's bodies were both presented in the same place.
I didn't...
At the same time as Saigon, who was beginning to waver, something else responded. No one had noticed the presence of the thing that had jumped down from the keep of the Castle of Separation until the last moment. Landing on the ground, its impact kicked up a wave of dust that billowed out towards us. Master.
Ah!
As if to protect Saigon, The monster stepped forward. The torch, still on the floor, illuminated the creature from its feet upwards. It looked like some sort of enormous wolf or spider with a height easily over 2 meters. Its skin, covered in mud and blood, looked like armor made of metal. What was more unsettling, though, were the bits and pieces of human remains stuck to it.
I ask you, the angel's name.
The creature growled. Was that the same question Haina Istari had been given? What about his Shiri Adashino? And now?
If you are unable to answer, you shall be torn apart. A letter.
The monster suddenly tensed up. Seeing the creature's reaction, my master took a single breath before picking up the lantern at his feet. Opening the window of the lantern, he stuck a cigar into the flame inside.
This was nothing more than a game set up by Garion Ashbourne. Who knows if he actually planned on giving the inheritance to someone if they could find the answer. Though I would put money on the guess that he didn't.
Taking a drag on his cigar, he continued. The Castle of Separation, Adra. No doubt Adra is a truncated form of Adramelech, the fallen angel. I have considered it could be referring to Adrastia, the Greek goddess, but as she has no connections with angels, I ruled it out fairly early. Luvia raised an eyebrow. Of course, she had considered the same thing. Before she had attempted to steal control of the workshop, she had found the foundational formula written with the names of various fallen angels. Naturally, Adramelech was one of those used in the formula.
But a fallen angel would be no good as an answer. If we are asked for the name of an angel, we have to get back to the holy variety. So the next step is to use the 3 letters given by the Shema Mafori to reconstruct the original name. So for example, my angelic name being Mihail, we would end up with the letters M-I-H. Luvia's Michael would be M-I-K. Oh, right, because the names were originally in Hebrew. You have to take into account how they've changed in spelling. We're not really interested here in the letters, but the sounds. So the CH turns to K.
My master moved his cigar around to spell out the letters of the alphabet. M-A-H. After that, he spelled out the whole name. Mihail. Reconstruction. The opposite of notaricon, the abridgment used in the Shemam Foray. For example, taking the word Amen and reconstructing the phrase Adonai Melech Nemen.
For Adramelech, we could come up with ADR, ADL, or ADM, so if you play with the order of the letters and switch them for their base sounds, the matching angel from the Shemaphory is Aladaya. See? Simple enough a child could do it.
My master gave a small sigh. Now that he mentioned it, it was really just a code. Even if it was a technique important for magecraft, it was still far removed from magecraft itself. It was no wonder my master had said it was no more than a game set up by Garion Ashbourne.
Oh, by the way, the message regarding the zodiac, the angel becomes a beast. Glaring at the western sky, it swallows the sun. How kind of him to give confirmation that you were on the right track, connecting the angels' names to the zodiac. But really, it was just a red herring, attempting to distract you from the real issue at hand.
Yeah, you're right about that.
Behind the beast came a voice of confirmation, a voice that I recognized and yet still seemed unfamiliar. It was the opposite of what happened with Orlok. While the voice no doubt belonged to Tokitu Jirobu Sagan, the manner of speaking was nothing like him.
You?
In response, he nodded. Forcefully, he tore the Yamabushu robes from his right shoulder, exposing the faintly glowing magic crest on his unexpectedly burly upper arm. It took the form of 2 separate patterns, with one of the patterns having just finished receiving the meaning of the other. Saigon. No. Grinny laughed. At the same time, the beast cried out. That howl, with the power to disable the magic crests of others, knocked us out once again. Chapter 5. Part2. The beast's howl came at them as a wave of pressure, blowing away the magi that it had struck. But the one who seemed most affected was the one who had caused the shockwave, Grenid himself.
An angel song. Even against someone who has no magic crest, a direct hit seems to be fairly effective, though it's a bit strange that no one was knocked unconscious this time, don't you think?
My master struck the nearby wall of the keep with a hand, which gave off a deep, resounding noise. The noise echoed unnaturally, filling the night air around the castle.
It's almost like a kind of tuning fork. Or maybe calling it an amp would be more appropriate. No matter where you are in the castle, that monster's song can still reach you. That's probably how it was designed from the start, to make the most of your song. That's how, no matter who your opponent, you could always win as long as you were in this castle. It's a pretty safe assumption that a magus with any considerable degree of skill will start to rely on their magic crest, after all.
Magecraft reliant on sound, only possible in this castle which could amplify and multiply it, refined even further by Ashbourne's secret. Thinking about it after the fact, the hints were there. The strangely echoing hall, the sound of footsteps causing my master to furrow his brow. Maybe even Heine figured all that out before he died.
Thanks to Miss Luvia Gelita's efforts, we were able to put a limit on that ability. That beast's song will no longer be amplified by the castle.
Honestly, it had me a bit worried.
The beast's response was swift. Grabbing Renid in its mouth, it leapt to the top of the keep.
So you're going to try and run away?
As my master watched them bound away, the Magi behind him spoke.
After that first ambush and making those magic circles, I've got nothing left, you know. I'm completely dry. I also will be unable to help as long as I am maintaining the spell to suppress the monster's howl.
Right. Sorry for pushing you two so hard. You can leave the rest to us, now. Can you do it?
Maybe I could, or maybe I can't.
Then I'll leave the rest to you, Gray.
Understood. Understood. I jumped. With a single leap, I launched myself a few meters into the air, kicking off of the keep's wall in pursuit of the beast. Probably because that jump had showed a strength even beyond what would be possible with magical reinforcement, I could faintly hear Luvia's voice below me as I leapt away.
Is she some sort of homunculus too?
That was a reasonable assessment. A homunculus would be able to display feats like that without issue. According to rumor, many of the homunculi of the famous Einsborn family were able to boast strengths comparable to that of even phantasmal species.
No, she's as human as they come. However, situations like this are kind of her specialty.
Why was it that I was able to hear what they were saying so clearly, even from so far away? For a brief moment, the distinction between earth and sky had lost its meaning. Kicking off from the wall of the castle, the beast and I clashed repeatedly in a world tilted 90 degrees. Dull sounds echoed out countless times as we struck each other. Having lost momentum from hitting each other so many times, we kicked off the wall one more time and rose up to the spire on top of the castle. Even there was an angel. Bravely raising its sword, it looked the same as the statue where we had found Hishiri impaled.
Once again, the beast howled. If the magecraft behind the Castle of Separation was based on sound, then it might be better to characterize its howl as a wave suffused with magical energy.
A wave of sound inaudible to humans. Even if it was filled with magical energy, it was still a completely unknowable existence to an ordinary human.
By changing the magical energy and wavelength of the sound, it could be changed from a wave that disabled magic crests to a blast of darkness that destroyed the magus's opponent. If that was the case...
Ad.
Gotcha!
How did it look to the beast, I wondered, when my blade sliced its attack right out of the air, while Ad had already begun his transformation. Now the cage in which he was held opened even further. With a hazy glow like a will-o-wisp, their shape changed dramatically, a form that anyone would recognize of a tool used to harvest, a shape to collect souls, a grim reaper's scythe.
Ha! 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 What a great feeling! What a great night! It's like an all-you-can-eat buffet.
Slicing apart the wave of magical energy, the mouth engraved on the scythe laughed wildly. In the night sky above, the moon was just short of being full. Below, the crescent moon of Ad's blade was beautiful, the image of it slicing apart the waves of illusion burning itself into my heart. A voice beyond human hearing, an angel's song, a beast's song.
What are you?
Just Gray. Grenade Ashbourne. I recommend you surrender now.
Nah. No way.
Suddenly his previous voice returned. Saigen?
Gray, it's me, it's Saigen. Takatu Jirubu Sagan, you know? it's definitely me, but I just want to kill everyone down there. I just can't stop this feeling of wanting to tear everyone apart.
Still being held in the beast's jaws, Saigon grabbed his own head. His face looked like it was falling apart. Joy, anger, grief, desire, hatred. Though these were the 5 passions said to take over a human's heart, it was like all 5 had been sewn together into one expression. In a word, it was chaos. Like every possible emotion was fighting for control of him. Ah, I understand now. I understand now. It wasn't that Saigon was being possessed. Rather, 80 or 90% of Saigon was actually still there. For example, you could think of it like water in a test tube. While the test tube itself was Togato Jurubu Saigon, just a few drops of poisonous color were added to the mixture. While that poison had completely changed his fundamental nature, the existence that was Saigon still very much existed. You could call those few drops of poison whatever you wanted. Call it just an impulse, or the why done it. Either way, the corruption brought by a long-dead Magus was still alive and well. It made me feel nauseous. In a way, it was basically...
Sorry, kid. I really did like Heine. If only that guy hadn't noticed. If only he hadn't been the first one to find that monster. If only he hadn't made it so close to the heart of the workshop so fast. Damn it. There was no way I could ignore a magic crest that beautiful. I needed it so badly. I was starving for it so badly.
Even as the tears poured down his face, Saigon spoke. The tears were dyed a distinctly red color. It was the first time I had ever seen someone cry blood. No. As much as it was still Saigon, it was definitely someone else. The hardware and software were still Tokito Jurubu Saigon, but they were completely corrupted by the virus that was Grenade Ashbourne. Then if he wasn't Grenade Ashbourne, who was he? Whoever he was, he screamed.
Castle of Separation, Adra. Open the gate.
The door of the keep burst open. Without even seeing them, I could tell exactly what was pouring out from inside it, and my whole body began to shake. Suddenly, the doors of the keep burst open right in front of the Magi still on the ground. From the lobby within, and from the statues in the front garden, something invisible came pouring out. No, as Magi, it was something the people gathered there could see. Spirits, but they were different from simple souls belonging to ordinary people. It might have been better to describe them as the leftover energy, an old recording of a personality. For example, in Chinese Taoism, the soul was divided into 2 parts, the ethereal soul, which supported the mind and consciousness, and the corporeal soul, which supported the body and its functions. The spirits now covering the grounds of the castle could be completely described as the latter. These spirits were almost entirely corporeal souls.
So that's what they meant by angels.
Ever since arriving at the Castle of Separation, all of the Magi had felt the sensation of being watched by the angels. What if that was more than just their imaginations? The master of the castle, as the master of restoration, had no doubt brought many Magi here. Among them, how many had had their crests repaired, and how many had been harvested for raw materials. There were stories of many who had requested Ashbourne's services, but the procedure had failed. But even before that, would you even need a full hand to count the number of examples of his success? Either way, the land on which this castle was built had drank in the blood and souls of countless Magi. What if these spirits were all just the remains of those failures? Before coming to the Castle of Separation, Lord El-Melloi II had mentioned it. Angels in modern magecraft were just a label given to vague and ambiguous magical energies. The concept of angels used by the Castle of Separation was bestowed on these spirits in their creation, and then they were used to fuel the construction of the workshop. Each of those angels was thus a grave marker. Before that onslaught of vengeful spirits, a single whisper carried through the air.
Perform a dance.
The words of a single spell. As if conducting an orchestra, Orlok waved a single finger in the air. As he did so, a storm of illusionary butterflies filled the darkness and began entrapping the attacking spirits.
From the beginning, Papilio Mage's true purpose is the manipulation of things between the certain and uncertain after all.
Thank you.
With Flu's catalysts and energy exhausted and Luvia busy maintaining her own spell, the only one left to defend them was the old now young Magus. With that crisis averted, that only left
Gray.
Looking up at the spire above the keep, Lord El-Melloi II whispered the name of his attendant. For a third time the beast howled. This time Ad was unable to stop it, and I could feel the magic circuits in my body begin to short out. It was almost impossible to move my hands and feet. It would have been easier to move if I had been wearing clothes made of lead. As the spirits continued to pour out of the castle, I could feel my mind beginning to crack.
Really, Gray? You lived in a graveyard before, didn't you? How could you possibly still be afraid of ghosts?
I couldn't even answer. I was so afraid I could hear my own teeth chattering. This was the result just from me feeling the presence of spirits. It was the same feeling as when I had first come to the Castle of Separation. Just by feeling their presence, my body would start to shrink in fear, my legs would grow weak, and I wouldn't be able to move even a single finger freely. As if my guts had flipped themselves inside out, an unpleasant sweat poured out over my entire body. I was scared. I was so scared. I was so scared I was going to throw up.
What a joke! You're afraid of ghosts and you can't even remember the words of a simple prayer. The hell kind of gravekeeper are you? You're turning out to be an awful lot like me at this rate.
Sagan and Grenad's voices began to mix together as they mocked me. I was a joke. That was exactly right. I was joke, full of uncertainty and hopelessly broken. So, like an avalanche, the spirits of the Castle of Separation surrounded me, crushing me from all sides. Seeing the flow of the battle, Luvia looked up at Gray with chastisement in her eyes.
What is that girl doing?
Leave her alone.
Even while maintaining her own spell, Luvia pulled out a jewel to force her way into the fight. Before she could, Lord El-Melloi II held her back. He spoke the name of a certain graveyard.
And what does that...
It was a name Luvia was familiar with. It was one of graveyards with the oldest traditions, unmatched in Britain.
Really, she is a professional when it comes to dealing with spiritual entities. Actually, I was hoping for that, which is why I visited her home in the first place. But in her case, she has some extenuating circumstances.
Circumstances?
She's actually afraid of spirits.
In response to Luvia's narrowed eyebrows, he responded plainly. It was so plain, so straight, that it made it even harder to believe.
Is that even possible? She was born there, wasn't she?
Are all children born to Magi fond of magecraft? If we're just talking about ability, then even at that graveyard she was without peer. But even putting her skill aside, her body is too susceptible to being influenced by spirits. A person can't take that much from someone else, even if they were influences from living people.
At the end of his sentence, his words began to faltered at imagining, just for a moment, what that must be like. Being able to see and understand the true nature of any person you saw seemed like a curse enough. But on top of that, what if it was only for people who had already died? Even Magi needed to act with the utmost caution when it came to communing with departed spirits. If it was a corporeal soul that had just been removed from its ethereal counterpart, then all of its lusts and desires would be borne out, plain to see. How young was Gray when she was first forced to see that?
But you're her master, aren't you? Don't you have an obligation to protect her?
No, that's mistaken. You don't want to get caught up in what happens next.
The boiling torrent of spirits overwhelmed me. It was terrifying. I was so scared I couldn't bear it. I was so scared I couldn't even breathe. I was so scared that my mind and body began to shut down. It was so scary, just too scary. Having given up on trying to invade my actual body, the spirits returned to their forms as angels and began pulling on my hair, baring their teeth as if to devour my flesh. I screamed. It was scary, it was disgusting. It was a curse they were corrupted. They were thirsty, they were starving. It was sharp, there were too many of them. I was going insane, it hurt. They screamed so much they wanted to throw up. We were never buried. We were torn apart. We were torn to pieces. We wanted to be buried. We were left to rot. We were angry we needed to be destroyed. A mysterious sound reached my ears. It was the sound of spirits being eaten. The mouth engraved on my scythe devoured the spirits around me in one fell swoop.
Hee. Delicious. This is too delicious. It's been too long since I've got to eat like this. That El-Melloi guy was right again.
My partner's voice sounded far away. The only thing I could see was an immense sea of spirits. Ah, I remembered. Those who were more dead than the dead. Those who were more alive than the living. It was a scene I had seen countless times in my hometown. The absurd, irrational, unnatural things that were neither alive nor dead. In my ears, those words I had heard countless times were revived. That is what you must destroy. That, only that.
Exactly.
My lips moved. My will, and a will that was not my own. That function, my true nature, awoke once more. Even that scythe which devoured evil spirits was no more than a stepping stone to reach that end. So I can't let you exist. With a thud, my knees bent, and the scenery around me disappeared. With sheer explosive power, the girl vanished. Jumping from the spire to the roof of the keep didn't even take a second. If that speed wasn't vanishing, then what could you call it? The girl danced. The Grim Reaper's scythe danced. With the sound of her blade, the angels were sliced to pieces. All of those who stood before her were shattered like glass. The girl danced, closing in on the beast, her scythe cut halfway through its body. With the speed they moved, the difference in their size had lost its meaning. Like two shooting stars crashing into each other over and over, the two drew a Mobius strip in the night air. Every time they met, a tremor like an earthquake struck the castle. Explosions filled the air as if they were aircraft locked in a dogfight.
The hell is going on up there?
The Magi on the ground had already turned their attention away from the spirits pouring out of the castle. As if to protect their master, the entirety of them were rushing to attack Grey. Even so, the torrent of spirits before her was like frost before the morning sun.
I told you, didn't I? This is her specialty.
That doesn't even begin to describe her.
There is another reason, but it's a bit too far-fetched to accept, even for a magus, so I didn't think you'd believe me.
And what would that be?
Luvia stepped up to him. Luvia stepped up to him. Even from the short few days he had known her, he understood that at this point she wouldn't rest until she had her answer, so he gave in.
Her face is an exact copy of the servant saber that I saw.
What?
Luvia's reply came instantly. She had heard what he said perfectly well, but the words he had spoken didn't seem to have any connection to the current situation.
The Grim Reaper against a monster. That one line was the perfect description of the scene occurring above the castle. After clashing numerous times, the girl blocked the claws of the beast, holding it still on the roof of the keep. In a soft voice, she spoke.
Did you use those claws to kill Highness Dari?
Earth, water, fire, wind, sky. Be complete of your humkum svaha.
Shujindu. It was Saigon's magecraft. It was impossible to tell whether the personality behind it was Saigon's or Grenades, but at the very least he could still use the magecraft learned by Saigon. As long as he had the Castle of Separation as his backup, a long battle would tend toward his favor. So, the girl whispered, releasing the words that had been decided beforehand. Grey, rave, crave, deprave. Suddenly something changed, or maybe it would be better to say something was blown away. Just like the spirits from before, all the mana in the surrounding area was devoured. Being dragged into a space devoid of any magical energy, Ashbourne's monster screamed.
Wait, hold on. What did you just say?
She's King Arthur, the same one that was summoned in the Fourth Holy Grail War, the same one that killed my master, the heroic spirit that killed Professor Caniff. In the graveyard where she was born, there's a grave to King Arthur. Didn't you know? Well, I suppose it's not as famous as Glastonbury, or even Brittany or Cornwall.
His lips twisted with irony,
as if to say that he didn't really want to say it either.
Her face is an exact copy of the servant's saber that I saw.
Engrave in me. As I whispered, I hung my head. My own consciousness was dying. It had really disappeared a long time ago. That's why this voice wasn't my own. It belonged to another me, one that was hidden deep inside my heart. Another monster, created by the people in my hometown. A grave for you. Oh, ancient mystery, die away. Oh, sweet enigma, return to nothing.
Pseudo-intelligence disabled. Minimum magical energy levels and collection rate reached. Releasing second stage limiter.
Ad's voice, sounding unbelievably mechanical, echoed in the darkness. Like a door flying open as its magical seal came undone, the mystery in my hands opened. The scythe that devoured spirits and magical energy alike, conferring inhuman strength on its wielder, was not Ad's true form. No, the fake intelligence that was Ad only existed as a temporary seal to stop the degradation of the weapon's mystery in the first place. A seal for this spear. In a way, I was the same way. The beast howled again. I had lost track of how many times it had howled like that, but it didn't matter anymore. Impacting into the wall of concentrated magical energy suffusing the air around me, the attack dissipated of its own accord. It was basic logic that a mystery would be erased by another mystery of greater power. No matter how profound the magecraft that went into creating Ashbourne's monster, it had no way of standing against that spear. Sagan and Grenede's overlapping voices sounded so distant.
Hell Canicle! Holy Spear activated it!
The Grim Reaper's scythe had fully deployed. In a way that didn't seem to be physically possible. The scythe had twisted and changed shape, taking its true form as a spear. No, that wasn't quite right. The heroic, noble magical energy pouring off of it made it clear that this was not just a spear. It was on a completely different scale. It was like a tower standing at the end of the world. A crystallized mystery proving that countless legends, countless myths were true. It was the end of the story. The accursed yet divine spear, decorating the end of the legend of King Arthur. Softly, the true name of that weapon left my lips. The spear shining Rango. The time had come. The divine spear warped and shuddered. Unable to resist the vortex of swirling magical energy, the castle of separation shook as if in fear. Though it was built only to respond to waves of sound, the sheer amount of magical energy was forcibly drawing a reaction out of it. The manifestation that drew in all manner from the surrounding environment was like disaster incarnate. The 13 promises hadn't been released yet, so it was still only a small fraction of its full power peeking through. Even so, that small fraction was on the level of divine spirits, something magecraft couldn't hope to match. That level of magical energy, concentrated to the absolute limit, could be felt like an extreme heat. It felt like I was sticking my hand into a volcano. Ashbourne's beast would not make it in time. There was no way it could. The manifestation in my hands was a noble phantasm exceeded only by Excalibur itself, the divine spear wielded by King Arthur against his mortal enemy, Mordred. At the end of the world. At the end of the world. My Naiad. Who could even see that spiraling light? Even though it was night, it was as if the sun had suddenly risen, as if a piece of the sun had fallen down amongst them, a brilliant crimson spiral. The magical energy, and even the water vapor that hung in the air were burned and boiled away. The flash of light from the age of gods riding forth like a mounted tyrant. Gouging out the spire above, the light pierced through the castle of separation's domed roof and castle wall, only stopping when it bit deep into the hillside beyond the castle. Both Sagan and Ashbourne's monster vanished before that light. Chapter 5, Part Cat. With a violent climax, the battle came to a conclusion.
King Arthur.
In contrast, Lord El-Melloi II scratched his head as if the whole ordeal was just a nuisance.
Well, I suppose in reality it's more like she's a descendant of one of his distant relatives. That's also why their graveyard happens to have King Arthur's grave.
Then, That was a heroic spirit's noble phantasm.
At that, Luvia's words trailed off. Mysteries passed down since the Age of Gods came in a variety of forms. One of the most famous of those would be the legend carrier of the Fragga family. But even Luvia knew that was a territory she could not step into lightly. Though knowing he should head to retrieve his student, instead, Lord El-Melloi II turned towards the ruins of the castle she had destroyed. Seeing how the earth had been gouged out by the blast, he raised an eyebrow.
What do we have here?
In the middle of the crater, where steam was still rising, a small hole peeked through the rubble. It seemed that the noble phantasm had been so destructive, it had revealed a room that had been hidden beneath the ground.
Mr. Orlok.
Ah, yes. You have my thanks, young lord.
At Lord El-Melloi II's urging, the two of them began walking towards the revealed secret room.
What is this? After all that, you still plan on keeping secrets from us?
It's complicated.
With a half-hearted excuse, the Lord pulled out a cigar as he descended carefully into the crater, thanks perhaps to the nature of the noble phantasm, or maybe to the defensive properties of the castle itself. The heat from the attack had already mostly dissipated. The two were able to proceed to the center of the crater without fear of their shoes melting. Suddenly, a shape moved, covering the entry into that secret hole.
Grenade Ashbourne?
With one arm torn off and his clothes and hair burned to ash, it was no wonder his vocal cords didn't function either. But even compared to him, the creature beside him was in much worse shape. The beast must have made a last-ditch effort to knock Saigon out of the way of Rungbalmened's blast, but in doing so it had lost a full half of its body. Even if it was a creature made of magical energy, there was no other possible result when meeting a blast of magical energy so much greater than itself. The fact it was still struggling at all was beyond possibility even in the world of Magi. The thing that made that miracle possible was...
Mother.
Granade screamed. Orlok's words from earlier came unbidden to Lord El-Melloi II's mind. Though it was as a magus, he really did love them. He even spoke quite fondly of me. The fact that his wife died so soon after his son's birth was no doubt one of the reasons for all this. The beast's jaw opened, facing Orlok Sigismund.
Incrap.
Lord El-Melloi II moved instinctively. Below the surface of the ground as they were outside the range of Luvia's suppression spell. On top of that, the beast in its death throes was not holding anything back. There was no way they would get off with only having their magic crest disabled. So, the beast howled.
Lord?
Orlok shouted, covering for the butterfly magus. The attack struck Lord El-Melloi II, head on. As soon as he opened his eyes, he understood that he was alone. The world was cloaked in fog. No matter how much he looked around, there was nothing to be seen except for that.
I see. So this is what that song actually does. A song that attacked the magic crest directly. Since I had no magic crest, it seemed to be attacking my mind instead. Muttering that there was no need to replicate his stiff shoulders if they were stuck inside his own mind, the youth looked around him once again. Unlike the darkness that he and Luvia had been trapped in earlier, this was just a simple fog, obscuring everything. No doubt that fog was the true form of the song's curse.
You've been trying so hard all this time, haven't you? Thought suddenly intruded directly into his brain. Before he realized it, he could see a shadow lurking deep within the fog. But you should already know by now. No matter how hard you struggle, you will never catch up. The shadow spoke. The shadow laughed.
The boy pressed a hand to his chest. For him, that was the most vulnerable part of his heart. Something he had accepted, something he had given up on without confessing it to a single person.
In the end, all you can do is walk along the rails laid down by true geniuses. Even if you can borrow their knowledge to identify and measure the talents of others, you yourself will never amount to anything. Everyone around you will always shine brighter. You will never have your turn in the spotlight. That voice spoke as if pulling out his own thoughts. A curse. It was a curse in the truest sense. It snuck into a person's thoughts and twisted them right from the source. It was the most primitive, most basic of curses. It was something used not by just magi, but by everyday corporations, everyday men and women in their own bedrooms. The most powerful curse possible. What tens of thousands, What millions of people had tasted that bitterness and ended their lives? How many dynasties had that curse brought to their knees? Just as it caused a magic crest to rot from the inside out, Dashet was a curse that gouged out his true character. Finally, he opened his mouth in reply.
You're looking at it the wrong way.
The curse wavered, not because it was a response that should have been impossible, but because the boy had changed into something that reflected an even truer part of his nature.
I've already received enough honor. Somewhere within this world, I felt like I could hear the song that was binding him. It was something he would never be able to reach, never be able to lay a finger on, but it still gave him the impression of an incredibly beautiful, incredibly transient song.
It was an honor that I promised to pay back later. The figure of Lord El-Melloi II had reverted to that of a younger time, the form he had 10 years prior, during the Fourth Holy Grail War. His hair was much shorter. His perpetually grumpy face was much more lively. With that form, he turned to speak to the fog. So that's why I have to become someone who is worthy of that honor. The order was reversed, but now I have to prove that what you saw in me wasn't a mistake. Even now, he could still hear that man's words. In response, he had spoken, "You are my king. I will serve you. I will devote myself to you. So please, lead me. Please, let me see your dream too." How selfish, how immature those words had been.
At one point, he had wished to die alongside him, the greatest ruler the world had ever seen.
The one who had conquered half of the world in his own lifetime, the one who had come closest to complete world domination in human history. For a time, he had wished to die alongside him, just as his countless other subordinates were allowed to. Faced with that wish, his king had given a light-hearted laugh. Instead of granting that wish, he instead gave him a new mission. Live, that was all he commanded of me. Within that boy's heart was a golden light. It was an oath that would never be forgotten, a light that would never fade. See it to the end, survive, and tell his story. It was really selfish, completely unreasonable. Thanks to him, I had been brought so close to the edge of death. And yet at the last minute, he pressed that on me. Do you know how much trouble that put me through? I could complain all night and still not run out of things to say about that idiot.
The current Lord El-Melloi II spoke, as if saying goodbye to the boy named Wave of Velvet. The man that had returned to his true form raised his head with pride.
I already know what I want to do, what I can do. Of course he was contradicting himself. Even as he accepted who he truly was, whenever he was confronted with those with true talent, his envy felt like burning alive. Heine Ishtari, Luviagalita Edelfelt. These young geniuses soared so effortlessly above him. His dream to fly along with them was ingrained in his very soul, but it was just a dream. It was okay to leave it as just a dream. That was what he thought. It was okay to leave it as just a dream. That was all he could think. What do you think? Isn't it a pleasant life? I have no reason to sit here and let people like you dictate what my life has to be. Though it took me almost 10 years to get to that conclusion myself, so I shouldn't really talk so big.
The fog shattered like glass. Slowly, he opened his eyes. The song was over. If he was honest, he wouldn't have minded listening to it a little longer. At his feet was a pile of ashes from one of his cigars. The scent rising from those ashes was the anchor connecting him to reality. The time when he and Luvia had been trapped, it was these same cigars that had enabled him to create the bounded field that protected them so quickly. Each of his cigars was actually a disposable mystic code, each one laden with a simple magecraft. Even Gray, his closest disciple, was unaware of that fact.
Well, you came back an awful lot faster than I expected. I had thought you would be trapped within your own mind for the rest of your life. I would have felt awful, what with you only getting hit because you were covering me.
The young Orlok met his return with a gentle smile. It seemed he had only been unconscious for a few seconds, but even those few seconds were long enough for a tragedy to occur. Orlok's body was hunched over. Tokitu Jirubu Sagan had rammed him with the full force of his body, clutching a sharpened toko in his hands. Originally from India, it was a ritual tool used for Buddhist ceremonies, but as if remembering an even older purpose, it was now embedded deep in Orlok's stomach.
Don't bother worrying about this. The boy's already finished.
His gaze drifted to the side. It seemed that last howl, a final desperate effort, had been enough to put Ashbourne's monster out of its misery as well. He was too late. Faced with that reality, Lord El-Melloi II's face twisted into a bitter expression.
I figured out one more whodunit just now.
Oh?
You're the one who killed Geryon Ashbourne, aren't you?
What?
Having just arrived on the scene, Luvia exclaimed loudly with wide eyes. In contrast, the boy gave a dry laugh. His face was already beginning to wither, slowly returning to the appearance of the old Orlok. Being a homunculus, once the source of magical energy that was supporting his body dried up, it seemed to begin aging all at once.
Granted, Ashbourne was obviously obsessed with you. Even the way the whole thing was set up like some sort of ritual all seemed like it was designed to scare you as well. I can't think of any other motive for why he would be so fixated on you.
Revenge. Well, he probably knew that it was going to happen. After all, he had implanted Grenede's magic crest onto the Yamabushi beforehand. I'm sure he could have done with any other host, but he was probably chosen just because of his timing.
Keeping pressure on his stomach, Orlok spoke with a faltering tone. As gently as possible, he laid Saigon's body on the ground. After helping him lower the body, Lord El-Melloi II spoke again.
Why did you kill Geryon?
That's a story far too old now. Why do you see if you can guess? You're the type that likes riddles, aren't you?
Without so much as a pause, he replied instantly.
Is it because you are Grenede's real father?
Luvia stiffened, turning to look at her disarrayed state. Orlok spoke again.
The case files of Lord El-Melloi II, cast by Arteli Studio. Please subscribe to our channel if you enjoy listening.
I guess I can't hide anything from you, can I, my young lord?
Orlok, who had returned almost entirely to his old estate, paused to sigh deeply before giving a dry laugh. In the end, who was he laughing at? What was he laughing at?
Though there was a considerable difference in age, Geryon's wife was an old friend of mine. When I began working with Geryon, it was my first time meeting her in decades. As improper as it was for someone my age, I had fallen in love.
Thinking about it now, Geryon must have known about it. The fact his wife lamented being unable to bear any children. The fact I took advantage of her. He must have known it all when we met.
So, that was when Grenede was...
It was a mistake, and it only happened once. After that, she became sick, and I was told she passed away shortly after giving birth. At the time, I had no idea whose child it was. The entire time I was working with Ashbourne, I could barely sleep from the fear of whether Ashbourne's magic crest would be able to take root in him or not. Though, as I worried, he ended up getting sick and dying as well.
As Orlok had told them earlier, even the secret medicines borrowed from a druid had been no help.
A while after the boy's funeral, I suddenly received a message from Geryon. Thanks for everything. I've got something to show you. I don't even have to tell you what he wanted to show me, do I?
Orlok's gaze returned to the lifeless form of Ashbourne's beast. Thinking of what Grenede called it earlier, it was obvious what its true identity was. A human become beast. The wife suddenly dying after giving birth.
What do you think? He asked me, full of pride. He had already conquered her illness, but even if she was useless to him as far as bearing children, he could always just turn her into a familiar. I plan to turn her into a storehouse for magic crests. Thanks to what I learned from your Papilio Magia, she can now hold and preserve any kind of magic crest imaginable.
Lord El-Melloi II listened in silence. Even Luvia could do nothing but listen quietly to the old Magus's confession.
Thinking about it now, maybe he was being serious. Maybe he really did love her, really did love his son. Maybe turning her into that monster was just his way of expressing that love as a magus.
A magus gives his life for his magecraft. As long as it took you at least one step further into the depths of that magecraft, any sacrifice was warranted. Even though he was the one who had stepped furthest into that darkness, Orlok had forgotten that fact for that one moment, and didn't remember it even after Geryon's murder, even after leaving the scene of the crime.
And then you received the invitation?
Right? I was wondering what on earth was going on, but I never would have guessed his dead son
had already been turned into a magic crest and embedded into someone else.
Blowing over the now exposed pathway to the secret underground room, the wind sounded like a mournful cry.
And how much did you know about these circumstances?
Only that there was someone here who wanted to save the Castle of Separation.
That's it? What are you? Some kind of romantic? Or are you just an idiot?
Before Luvia's small fit of anger, Orlok laughed again. Since the beginning of the incident at the Castle of Separation, it was the most innocent, guileless voice they had ever heard from him. Orlok's body hunched forward.
My son,
He said, stroking Saigon's face. From there, he began walking, dragging his feet through the dirt, soaked in blood pouring from his open stomach. Those few meters must have felt like a months-long journey to him. Though his face told how painful that journey was, he still smiled like a boy who had finally found his bluebird of happiness. Reaching out, he touched Ashbourne's beast, whose breath had long since stilled.
my love.
Embracing the beast that had once been his lover, he spoke. Perform a dance. Countless golden butterflies appeared, filling the world around them. A spell to return the woman to her original form. Ashbourne's beast, which looked like a hybrid of a wolf and a spider, returned to its original form of a beautiful woman. Though the half of her body that had been blown away didn't return, the image of them embracing under the moonlight was truly beautiful. The old Magus's breath finally stopped. Before long, voices called from behind them.
What do you think you're doing? This is your student, you know.
Having no knowledge of what had just happened there, Clown and Flu called out as they carried the unconscious Grey over.
Squinting in the light of the autumn sun, I paid a visit to the clock tower for the first time in a while.
Different from the actual clock tower in the centre of London, this was placed in the midst of a scenery of interwoven brick and stone buildings that reminded me of my hometown. The cityscape was an odd blend of contemporary and medieval architecture, some of the buildings dating back as far as the 12th century. With over 40 student dormitories and over 100 school structures of various purposes, even the everyday lives of the people living there had been subsumed by the school. At the centre of this area, that first school built among the city buildings was referred to with reverence by Magi everywhere as the Clock Tower.
Even within the city, the scenery changed considerably depending on which department of the school was responsible for it. The Department of Modern Magecraft, under the supervision of my master, was placed around a road named Slur Street.
As recent as 10 years ago, the area had been nothing but a neighbourhood coincidentally close to the clock tower, but as students from the Department of Modern Magecraft continued to flock to the area, the Magic Association had finally caved in to their need for a space of their own and bought up the whole area. Of course, the cost of the endeavour was all forwarded to the Department of Modern Magecraft itself, so although a new neighbourhood purchased by the Magic Association sounded nice in theory, the end result was a scenery of cheap-looking buildings. Well, I kind of liked that cheapish look at the very least. In any case, as I entered the main building for the Department of Modern Magecraft, I immediately hid myself. Not even 10 seconds after I arrived, heavy footsteps sounded in the hall before me.
Grainy!
Waving a hand was a handsome young boy with golden curly hair.
Wait, what? Gray? Where'd you go, Gray? Surely the scent of my fair lady I haven't met in 2 weeks was coming to me from the doorway.
Looking around the area, the boy's nose twitched like a dog, searching for a scent. As if that wasn't enough, he then began running his nose along the walls and pillars in the room, sniffing as he went. The number of his classmates that lamented his eccentricities paired with his good looks was not small. In fact, thanks to his looks and his bloodline, his popularity with the girls was actually quite high despite his bizarre behavior. Apparently, a fair number of parents were egging their children on to hurry up and claim him as well. In many ways, he was a disruption to the peace of mind of many a magus. Of all my master's students, this boy who prided himself on being an idiot genius was without a doubt the most difficult person for me to deal with. Flat Toscados. Half a year later, another intense pairing, including none other than Luvia herself, would make their debut in a mineralogy course taught by my master, but at the current time I had no idea that was coming. Finally, the dog boy gave up his chase. and after dropping his shoulders in disappointment, he left the entranceway. Just as I made to breathe a sigh of relief,
I can understand why you'd hide from him.
a voice called out from the shadow of the pillar, causing me to jump in surprise. Ah, Master!
I'm glad to see you've recovered.
Hi, Ibby. I never thought you'd go so far as to pull out the pier, but I did get to eat my fill after all.
From the area near my right hand, Ad once again laughed. Once he had said his piece, I continued. Yes, somehow. I heard about what happened afterwards from Miss Rhines.
Thank you for your hard work. Unfortunately, with a method like that, there was no way it would restore her magic crest.
I had heard about that as well. Just as Orlok had guessed, the reason my master had participated in the inheritance game was because of the damaged state of the El-Melloi family crest. As it was now, the crest was at no more than a fifth of its original strength, and that crest had been transplanted to the true heir of the El-Melloi family, Rhaenys El-Melloi Arcasorte. I could only guess at the conversation that had happened between Rains and my master, but the contract that came out of those talks seemed to be predicated on two things: the restoration of the El-Melloi family crest, and the repayment in full of his debt to the El-Melloi family. Putting aside the latter for the moment, the former seemed all but impossible right from the start. Using conventional methods, it was doubtful whether a tuner spending their entire life on repairing it would be able to accomplish the task. And yet it seemed my master had no intention of arguing the terms of that contract.
For the record, I did manage to accomplish one thing while we were there. Whether it's anything we can rely on or not is still a bit suspicious. However,
My master added with an unpleasant expression. No doubt he was speaking of the person who had managed to stay neck and neck with him throughout the investigation of the Castle of Separation. If at all possible, he probably wanted to avoid relying on her as much as he could. You're an awfully awkward person, aren't you?
did you say something?
No.
As I tried to think of an excuse, I went stiff, as did my master.
He was the first to recover, though. Taking a deep breath, he turned and spoke to the newest arrival in the hallway.
I see you managed to find your glasses.
I appreciate your concern. They are rather precious, after all.
Mystic Eye killers are pretty hard to come by these days, right?
Saying that, my master turned his gaze directly towards her. Somewhat out of place in the marble of the school building, she was wearing a hand-printed long-sleeved kimono. Her hair was strangely long, reaching down to her ankles. Matched with those clothes and that hair, the rest of her body gave off the impression of a snake. Hishiri Adashino.
My lord doesn't seem all that surprised, though, does he?
Pushing up the frames of her glasses, Hishiri smiled sweetly. My master replied with an annoyed tone.
The Faculty of Law never concern themselves with the mysteries of magecraft. Your goal is just the maintenance of the clock tower itself. As such, unlike other magi, your primary objective is simply finding ways to avoid death.
With a calm sigh.
It seems like you have a guess as to how I did it, as well.
I was discussing it with Orlok earlier, you see. Whether it was the Faculty of Law or the Castle of Separation itself, finding a preserved corpse should have been child's play for you. All you had to do was find a body with a build similar to yours. Once you got rid of the eyes, the whole face was effectively hidden. Even the news knows that, hiding just a person's eyes to keep their identity secret. On top of that, with the shocking manner of death, others would be dissuaded from investigating any deeper than the surface. After seeing your body the way we did, no one would even consider whether that was actually you we had found.
My, how discerning. I had been concerned that simply swapping a dead body in would be too simple, but it looks like the fact we were all magi allowed me to pass it off without suspicion. Of course, only thanks to you not sharing your thoughts.
Watching her smile, my master kept silent for a while. Then, as if he had needed to chew the words first, he spoke.
Mr. Saigen barely managed to survive the ordeal, but he's still in rehabilitation. Cleanly separating the memories of Tokatu Jirabu Saigen and Granite Ashbourne is proving quite difficult, and it seems that removing the magic crest didn't have any substantial effect.
Rosalind, who we found hidden in the middle of the workshop, has also yet to get over the death of her brother. Highness Crest was able to be recovered, but that has just drawn Rosalind back into the conflict over who will succeed the Starry family.
How awful.
Hishari's face held an honest sadness to it as she spoke, honest, as if she was sympathizing with the trials of a character from a novel she was reading, as if he couldn't blame her for her way of thinking. My master let it slide as he changed the topic of the conversation.
The Faculty of Law has been working with the Ashbourne family for the past 100 or so years to help him with his ritual, haven't they?
Oh, why would you think that?
Even if one's magic crest being damaged is a matter of some embarrassment, there is no way that every single magi that went to him for a restoration disappeared without any rumors sprouting up, especially considering how rare the services he offered were. If he wanted to erase those rumors, he would have needed the help of an organization that had eyes on the entire Magic Association, like the Faculty of Law, for instance.
As the thought clicked in my head, I almost blurted my surprise out loud. Hishari's smile was unfaltering. With the calm gentleness of the full moon, Hishari's smile didn't so much as twitch as she listened.
On top of that, everyone who was gathered at the Castle of Separation for Ashbourne's inheritance was someone of considerable clout within the clock tower, and someone who the Faculty of Law would have difficulty keeping the reins on. That was the case for all of his rituals, wasn't it? Ashbourne's system for gathering materials for his restoration was, at the same time, a system for the Faculty of Law to get rid of those magi who were in your way.
Lord El-Melloi II, do you have any proof to back up these accusations?
Not a bit.
Then I thank you for your amusing fiction, but if you don't have even an ounce of evidence, it's a bit difficult to even call it detective work, no?
Naturally.
My master turned to look out the window. Even having seen through to the true scheme underneath would be no consolation to anyone. From the start, a magus's consolation couldn't come from anything outside of magecraft anyways. Even I felt the painful vacancy behind that drive, that impulse.
Then, one last thing. You are the one who created the angelic names, aren't you?
Oh my.
Hishari said, raising a hand to her mouth, as if to say she had never considered that would have been figured out.
Of course, Notarican and Gematria are the specialties of Kabbalah, but you played with them just a little too much. It just didn't match what little of Gerion's nature we could understand from the rest of the castle. A puzzle like this one could only have been made by someone who really didn't care about magecraft all that much.
I see. And magi who are capable of thinking like that are fairly limited, right?
Why done it? My master had said before that the why was the only thing we could figure out. Trying to figure out what kind of magecraft had accomplished it, what kind of magecraft could accomplish it, was impossible. But by looking at the results, you could match the why to a magus' particular nature.
For example, me. For example, you. Being a magus is a dance with deception and mystery. Everyone knows reaching the root is impossible, yet still they chase it. Only people like us are able to extricate themselves from that foolish dance. Or at least, so I thought. Was I wrong?
You don't pursue it because you lack the will. I don't pursue it because I lack the talent. We're different enough to make me feel nauseous.
Even if the result is the same? I didn't think you'd be such a sentimentalist as to say the journey is what's important.
Hishari extended a hand towards my master. Even in a royal palace, no matter what the occasion, what man could refuse her offer?
Won't you dance with me?
Unfortunately, I'll have to refuse. Now, if you'll excuse me.
If anyone could, it was my master. Suddenly taking my hand, he walked past Hishari, pulling me along. As I stumbled from the unexpected force by which he pulled me forward, Hishari called out from behind us.
You haven't given up yet?
Right.
Without turning to face her, he answered.
I'm going to meet him again.
Him. Of all the words I had heard my master speak, that one seemed to hold something special. As if anyone being able to hear his words a single time would be able to live their whole life, chest puffed up with pride.
Once my contract with Rhinus is concluded, I will return to being just an ordinary magus. And when that happens, I will return to that fight. I will return to fight in the 5th Holy Grail War.
Of course, from our position in the future, we know. That vow would never be fulfilled. The prayers my master had built up for over 10 years would not reach that far eastern land, or the battle that would rage there. The battle known as the Fifth Holy Grail War would come to an end before my master could so much as touch it. But that was not a cause for despair.
Master?
Once we had separated considerably from Hishiri, I spoke. I was nervous and scared, but hiding as much of my feelings as I could, I called out to him.
What is it?
I've decided on something. Without raising my gaze, I whispered to the hand that was pulling mine. My life was nothing but regret, ever since I was aware of myself. No, even since the moment I was born, I had thought God had made some kind of mistake when he made me. Even now, that feeling grew ever stronger, and I had no delusions of it changing in the future. But even so, please, let me go with you to your battle. For the first time, I thought that this was one decision I would never regret. Commentary. I never thought I would meet Waver Velvet again in quite this manner. Until now, I had been quite satisfied that I was able to see cameos from him as Lord El-Melloi II, in other works, to see him return after ascending to such a splendid seat of power, having his name raised to such heights. For me, there was nothing that would make me happier. The prospect of seeing another author write about Waver as he was getting his footing as a magus, able to do nothing but sit back and watch as events unfolded around him, was honestly a point of unease for me, but in the end, that worry was for nothing. The character that came out on the other end of 10 years had grown splendidly, crowned with the title of Lord, and a completely different man from the boy I had written. The gentleman who had polished his powers of analysis, bearing a cunning like an old man's wisdom, while still hiding the distortion of his youth somewhere in his heart, was truly an enchanting character. It's now been 10 years since derivative works of the Fate franchise began being developed, and even now new printed works and anime adaptations are continuing to hit the shelves. It occurred to me that, with the influx of new fans to the series, this book may have been the first spin-off work some of them had ever actually read. In light of that, please allow me to give a brief explanation of this book's main character, Lord El-Melloi II, and his history. The original work all of this was based on, the visual novel Fate/Stay Night, debuted in January of 2004. And in October of the following year, alongside the release of the fan-disc, Fate/Hollow Ataraxia, work began on another spin-off that would become a prequel of sorts to Stay Night, Fate/Zero. In this work, the character of Waver Velvet, the boy that would one day rise to the position of Lord El-Melloi II, made his first appearance. By the way, though the release of Zero's first volume was slightly preempted by the release of character material, in August 2006, Lord El-Melloi II was included along with the rest of the Zero cast in the book, making it his first appearance. At that point, the character traits of famous clock tower lecturer and Japanese game otaku were decided on, and began development in Zero Volume 2 and onwards. In addition, Waver's character design was also developed by attempting to create a younger version of the already known Lord El-Melloi II. The rest was just filling in the complex history of London Star. With that much in the way of preamble, I can now explain how I came to be entrusted with writing the commentary of this book. The truth is, I am actually the author of Fate/Zero. I'm the one who raised little Waver. Knowing that, I hope you can understand why I was so excited to be writing this commentary. In a way, it was a feeling like I had married off my beloved daughter, and after 8 long years, she had returned home with my grandson. It was profound happiness like this that has kept me continuing as an author for so long, and it made me fully realize just how lucky I am all over again. By the way, as far as the plot of Fate/Zero was concerned, there was not much written about Waver's future other than he survives. It was actually another author who originally proposed in his side material that he would go on to achieve great success, becoming a lecturer at the clock tower and succeeding the name of El-Melloi. It was thanks to him that Waver's future became so bright. This kind of consideration for one's own characters was beyond me as a writer, so Waver really was quite a lucky boy to be blessed by such a kind original author. Also in this book we see the appearance of one of the flowers of the Fate series, Luviagalita Edofelt, as one who undertakes great effort that no one could laugh at. This is also an important point. Though she didn't have an appearance in the original visual novel, she was mentioned in various supplementary materials, so she began to appear in several derivative works. In these works, her role was incredibly striking, but perhaps too much so, as each time she appeared she tended strongly towards serving as comic relief. In this story of the Castle Adra, she very much carried the air of a heartless outsider, smelling of blood and playing by no one's rules but her own. It was like a professional comedian making a successful transition to a dramatic actor. The one who accomplished that amazing feat is nothing short of incredible. Being able to accomplish that while perfectly illustrating the activities of Lord El-Melloi II off of nothing but the basic setting was nothing short of a master's work. From the veteran who had survived, through the brutal light novel market, especially after moving himself to work in the world of Type Moon, was a work that mesmerized its readers with the dreadfulness akin to a naked blade. When I heard that the Case Files series was going to continue, I couldn't help but start looking forward to the next installment. Heroic spirits that transcended time, and magi pursuing true magic. For the writer, that world is like a mountainous vein of ore, and for the reader an even greater mountain of exciting things yet unknown. As one who was given the chance to explore that new continent myself, I can affirm this. This series will only pick up speed from here, and it will continue to drive you readers to wild excitement. Afterward, it was like a star to him. Most people would have likely just called it simple admiration, reaching out towards that one rare person, at times following them as a guide, at times mustering courage from their image, at times jealous or envious, but always reaching towards that person to whom there was almost no connection. He never thought to make the stars his own. He never thought to become a star himself. But if he couldn't give up, what could he do? For the one who had been enchanted by that star more than anyone else, who longed for it more than anyone else, who understood its meaning and its beauty more than anyone else, he knew better than anyone else that it would be forever beyond his reach. It would no doubt be easier on him if he just cut ties with it completely. But even knowing that, what if he decided to spend his life trying to get even a little closer to that star? What would he feel, looking up at the night sky? It was about 7 years ago that I was first approached about Type Moon books. On our way home from Shinjuku, at the light in front of Alta, he very passionately talked about how he wanted to release more books like Fate/Zero to broaden the Type Moon universe. Hearing that, I told him I definitely wanted to help, and so to contact me any time. And as I brainstormed ideas, the years passed. That passion was reignited at the unforgettable Type Moon 10th Anniversary Festival. In the middle of that dazzlingly beautiful event, while sitting beside the boss after he invited me, I was hit with a shock that made me want to scream. Both the novel and anime adaptation of Fate/Zero were fantastic works in their own right. But even so, watching on that huge screen with that incredible sound, I was struck by that fatal impulse all over again. I want to tell his story. Of course, you probably know whose story I'm talking about. Waver Velvet, known later as Lord El-Melloi II. A few days later, when I asked if anyone had plans to write a story about Lord El-Melloi II, I was struck with the unforgettable counter, nope. Do you? Through all the ups and downs of planning, no matter how many times we had to rewrite the plot, I never felt like I was suffering. Reading and rereading the already printed works, and confirming details about the clock tower and various characters with the boss was indescribably fun. Especially when looking at Luvia Galita, who had popped up in various works as an almost parody character. I carefully interrogated him on everything from her spells to her speech. As I reconstructed him, he gave me even more fresh information, and it saddened me I wasn't even able to include half of what he had given me. Now this time the story's style ended up being, in a broad sense, a mystery. For the subject, I used both real-world and Type Moon magecraft. Even in history, there are all kinds of ways magic has injected itself. Culture, race, custom, faith, art, and even lineage. In order to bring out the character of Lord El-Melloi II, I picked up as many of those aspects as I could. A man who knew the stars better than anyone, yet would never be able to reach them. That was how I tried to portray him. And I hope that as Watson, Gray, and Ad, as well as the other Magi at the Castle of Separation, all caught your interest in some way. Also, Many of you have probably already guessed this from the 1-inch printed on the front cover, but the current plan is to release one book every year. I'm hoping to meet again in this series every winter. Lastly, I would like to thank everyone who helped make this book possible. And of course, to you as well, for taking the time to read this book. I hope that somehow this story has worked some magic in your life.